Welcome, brave souls, to another spine-chilling episode of Echoes from the Abyss. Tonight, we embark on a journey through the shadowy corridors of Illinois, a state steeped in history and haunted by the restless spirits of its past. From abandoned asylums to long-forgotten wings of former hospitals, these locations are more than just buildings. They are silent witnesses to countless untold stories. As we delve into these haunted halls, remember, some doors, once opened, should never be closed. Peoria State Hospital in Bartonville, Illinois, was once a sprawling institution, a labyrinth of 63 buildings housing thousands of patients. Built in the late 19th century, it was considered a model for mental health care at the time, a place where treatments ranged from progressive to deeply disturbing by today's standards. For decades, it was a city unto itself, a community of patients, staff, and doctors, bound together by routine, tragedy, and a shared sense of isolation. Today, only 12 of those buildings remain standing, crumbling monuments to a past that refuses to rest. And for those who wander among the ruins after dark, Peoria State Hospital is far from silent. The most infamous landmark on the grounds is the graveyard elm. Beneath its twisted, skeletal branches lies the unmarked grave of a patient who died under circumstances long forgotten by history. Locals speak of the tree with a reverence tinged by fear. They say the branches sway even when there is no wind, and that shadows move beneath its limbs with a life of their own. Some visitors swear they hear whispers near the tree, faint voices calling names that echo with sorrow. Others feel sudden chills, a cold that creeps through the bones, lingering long after they leave the grounds. The remaining hospital buildings are no less haunted. Brick and mortar that once contained laughter, shouting, and the clatter of wheelchairs now hold only echoes that refuse to fade. Explorers who have ventured inside report doors that swing open on their own, cold drafts that shift unpredictably, and the sound of footsteps echoing through hallways that are otherwise empty. Some say they've seen shadowy figures pacing the halls, vanishing when approached, leaving behind only the faint impression of a presence that shouldn't exist. Peoria State Hospital has long been a magnet for paranormal investigators. EVP sessions in the dark corridors have captured faint murmurs and fragmented words, sometimes cries for help, other times laughter that turns to sobbing within a single breath. Flashlights flicker, equipment malfunctions inexplicably, and digital cameras capture orbs of light hovering in hallways where no one is present. Some skeptics dismiss it all as the natural result of a decaying building, shifting floors, drafty windows, and a mind's tendency to play tricks in the dark. Yet, the consistency of the reports, combined with the intense emotional energy that still hangs in the air, convinces many that something beyond explanation lingers here. Visitors often speak of the sensation of being watched. Even in empty rooms, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down is palpable. Some report hearing their names whispered in tones of both sorrow and warning. Others describe feeling sudden, inexplicable pressure on their shoulders, as if a hand were resting there briefly before vanishing. Objects move without cause, chairs shift positions, doors latch or unlock, and medical equipment left behind decades ago sometimes hums or clicks as though it is still in use. The hospital's history adds to its aura of dread. Patients once confined here endured harsh treatments, from electroshock therapy to lobotomies, from solitary confinement to experimental medications. Many did not leave the hospital alive. Records were incomplete, lost, or destroyed, leaving a lingering sense of unresolved lives. Stories abandoned in the very walls themselves. It is said that some of the spirits are the most sorrowful, tied to the pain and injustice they experienced. They linger in search of acknowledgement, or perhaps for a peace they never found in life. Even the landscape surrounding Peoria State Hospital seems to resist normalcy. The cemetery near the hospital, once a place of remembrance, has been overtaken by weeds and wild grass, giving the impression that even nature mourns what happened here. Visitors report hearing faint laughter from the courtyards, echoing through empty halls, or the rolling of a wheelchair across floors that no longer exist. Among the 12 remaining buildings, certain rooms attract particular attention. Treatment rooms, administrative offices, and long-abandoned dormitories have all produced chilling encounters. Cold spots appear suddenly, and personal items left behind, notebooks, clothing, or medical tools, often vanish or are found in entirely different locations. In some areas, unexplained shadows cling to corners, moving just beyond the reach of flashlights. Even those who visit during the day report an oppressive atmosphere, a heavy emotional weight that seems to push down from the ceilings and walls. Peoria State Hospital is more than a set of ruins. It is a monument to human suffering, to lives cut short, and to the lingering echoes of trauma. For those who wander its halls at night, the experience is both terrifying and sorrowful. You hear the whispers, feel the cold, and see the shadows. But the most haunting part is the sense of stories left unfinished, of people never properly mourned, and of a past that refuses to let go. Alton Mental Health Center, perched ominously on the bluffs above the Mississippi River in Alton, Illinois, has been a cornerstone of the community since the early 1900s. What was once hailed as a state-of-the-art facility for mental health care now stands in whispered infamy. Its brick and stone walls echoing stories of suffering, fear, and lingering spirits. From the very beginning, the institution carried a reputation for progressive medical ambition, yet that ambition often blurred the line between treatment and torment. In its earliest years, Alton Mental Health Center was home to hundreds of patients, many of whom were admitted for reasons that would seem trivial today: melancholy, grief, or behaviors deemed socially unacceptable. The treatments employed ranged from rudimentary counseling to cruel experiments that today are considered unethical and inhumane. Patients were subjected to ice baths, isolation cells, electroconvulsive therapy without anesthesia, and lobotomies performed under the strict authority of doctors whose concern for safety was often secondary to experimentation. Within these walls, suffering was routine, and hope was often a fleeting visitor. It's perhaps no surprise, then, that the stories of the facility's haunted corridors have persisted for decades. Staff, visitors, and urban explorers alike recount strange noises, whispers echoing from empty rooms, footsteps pacing hallways long after the last patient was discharged, and doors opening and slamming without cause. Many describe the sensation of being watched, of a presence brushing past in the shadows, or of cold spots so severe that they cut through coats and linger on the skin. The center's old wards are particularly notorious. Rows of rooms, once occupied by patients, now lie abandoned, peeling paint and cracked tiles, bearing silent witness to the trauma of decades past. In these spaces, shadowy figures have been reported moving between beds, sometimes seen staring out of the windows with hollow eyes. Some claim to have glimpsed faces in mirrors that should have reflected only empty rooms, faces twisted in despair, or mouths opening as though to speak, but no sound emerges. Alton Mental Health Center also has its fair share of auditory phenomena. Witnesses report hearing the faint clinking of restraints, the distant groan of wheelchair wheels across hallways, or the low murmur of a group of patients conversing, though the halls are empty. Sometimes, the echoes seem more urgent, cries for help, desperate sobbing, or murmured names whispered so faintly that one fears the voice might vanish if caught. Visitors often recount the sensation of a cold breath on the back of their necks, the hairs on their arms standing on end as though unseen eyes are watching every movement. Even the building itself seems imbued with memory. Floors groan under invisible weight, and lights flicker as though reacting to an unseen presence. Equipment left behind decades ago sometimes hums or clicks without cause. Cameras and recording devices pick up orbs of light, shadow figures, and strange anomalies that defy explanation. Many paranormal investigators are drawn to Alton not simply for curiosity, but for the opportunity to witness the lingering energy of a place steeped in both sorrow and cruelty. Among the most chilling stories are those of former patients who remain tethered to the hospital long after death. Some are believed to wander the halls of the old wards, still reliving moments of fear, pain, or isolation. Others appear at the edges of vision, glimpsed through windows or reflected in mirrors, before vanishing when attention is fully focused. Staff and visitors alike speak of sudden feelings of despair or panic upon entering certain rooms, as if the emotional residue of past trauma has become almost tangible. The history of Alton Mental Health Center contributes to the weight of its haunting. In addition to the experimental treatments, overcrowding and understaffing were chronic issues, leading to neglect and the deaths of countless patients. The hospital's records are incomplete, leaving many lives undocumented, many tragedies untold. This lack of closure seems to permeate the walls, creating an atmosphere thick with the weight of forgotten stories and unresolved suffering. Yet the haunting is not always violent. Many describe a sense of sorrow rather than menace. The lingering spirits are not angry but trapped, carrying the weight of their mistreatment and isolation. It is a place where empathy and fear intersect, where visitors can feel the pain and longing of those who lived and died within its walls, even as they try to navigate the cold, dark corridors themselves. For those who venture to Alton Mental Health Center today, the experience is one of both fascination and unease. The buildings stand as decaying monuments, brick and mortar steeped in history, both medical and spectral. The shadowed corridors, echoing halls, and abandoned rooms whisper of lives cut short, of treatments that were more punishment than care, and of the enduring imprint of suffering. Kankakee State Hospital, founded in 1877 in Kankakee, Illinois, has long stood as a grim testament to the history of mental health care in the United States. Known today as the Shapiro Developmental Center, the sprawling complex was built during a time when asylums were seen as places of refuge for the mentally ill. Yet the reality often fell far short of such ideals. Overcrowding, neglect, and experimental treatments were common, leaving behind a legacy not only of suffering but of lingering spirits that purportedly refused to rest. From its earliest days, Kankakee State Hospital struggled with the demands of a growing population. Patients were admitted for a variety of conditions, ranging from severe mental illnesses to behaviors that society at the time deemed abnormal. Overcrowding became a serious problem by the late 19th century, with wards packed beyond capacity, creating conditions ripe for disease, despair, and death. The hospital administration attempted to maintain order, but the sheer number of patients and the harsh methods employed to control them created an atmosphere of fear and hopelessness that some say has never entirely left the grounds. Visitors to the hospital today often describe the air as heavy and oppressive. The buildings themselves, large brick structures with long hallways and iron bars, exude a cold, almost sentient presence. Hallways echo with noises that cannot be explained, doors creaking open and shut on their own, the soft shuffle of shoes across tile floors, and the occasional sound of a distant scream or wail that seems to come from nowhere. Staff and urban explorers alike have reported hearing the clanging of metal, footsteps pacing in empty rooms, and the low murmur of voices when no one is present. One of the most commonly cited areas of paranormal activity is the old patient wards, where patients once lived in cramped conditions. Many report seeing shadowy figures moving between the beds or standing at the ends of hallways, vanishing when approached. Some describe faces appearing briefly in windows or mirrors, eyes wide with fear, mouths opening as if to cry out, only to disappear before anyone can respond. The hospital's basement and utility areas are particularly notorious. In these underground spaces, the echoes of the past seem to resonate most strongly. Equipment long abandoned sometimes hums or clicks inexplicably, and doors will slam shut without cause. Those brave enough to explore the lower levels have reported hearing the sounds of chains dragging along floors, the soft sobs of patients long gone, and even faint singing or humming that grows louder as they move deeper into the darkness. Some paranormal investigators claim that these areas hold residual energy from decades of despair, anger, and suffering, creating a concentrated hotspot for unexplained phenomena. Kankakee State Hospital also has its share of tragic stories. Many patients died within the walls, some from illness, others from harsh treatments or accidents. Records are incomplete, leaving countless lives unaccounted for. The lack of closure seems to permeate the buildings, and many believe that the spirits of those who suffered most remain tethered to the grounds. Visitors report intense feelings of sorrow or dread when entering certain rooms, as though the emotional residue of decades past has materialized into something tangible. Auditory phenomena are common as well. Witnesses have captured ghostly moans, whispers of names, and faint cries pleading for help on EVP devices. Others hear the clinking of restraints or the shuffling of feet in hallways that should be silent. These sounds are often accompanied by sudden drops in temperature, with cold spots so severe they bite through clothing, leaving explorers shivering even in mild weather. Despite the hospital's reputation, not all paranormal activity is violent or malevolent. Many who have visited describe the spirits as mournful rather than threatening, carrying the weight of their past, suffering rather than seeking to harm the living. Some have even reported feeling a presence guiding them safely through the darkened halls, or seeing fleeting glimpses of figures pausing, as if to watch over those who enter. The grounds themselves are no less eerie. The sprawling campus includes gardens, walkways, and courtyards where patients once walked in attempts at rehabilitation. At night, these areas are quiet, yet there are reports of figures appearing in the moonlight, wandering as they did a century ago. Lights have been seen flickering in empty buildings, and some witnesses claim to have seen full-bodied apparitions moving through the shadows, performing daily routines from a bygone era. For those drawn to the hospital today, whether historians, urban explorers, or paranormal enthusiasts, the experience is both fascinating and unsettling. The buildings are decaying, the paint peeling, and the floors sagging under years of neglect, yet they carry the imprint of the lives that passed through them. Every hallway, every room, every darkened corner seems to hum with memory, a reminder of the human stories, the suffering, and the lingering energy left behind. Elgin Mental Health Center, once known as the Elgin State Hospital, is a sprawling complex with a history as imposing as its architecture. Built in the late 1800s in Elgin, Illinois, it quickly became one of the largest mental health facilities in the Midwest. At its peak, the hospital housed over 7,000 patients, drawn from communities across the region. While its original mission was to provide care and rehabilitation, the reality within its walls was far darker, and the echoes of that past are said to linger even today. Visitors to Elgin Mental Health Center often speak of an unsettling atmosphere as soon as they approach the remaining structures. The main buildings, once bustling with staff and patients, now stand in quiet decay. Broken windows, crumbling brick, and overgrown pathways hint at the vastness that once was, and the air seems thick with memory. Locals warn that the hospital is not just abandoned, but haunted, and that those who enter may feel more than just the chill of an empty hallway. The hospital grounds include a small cemetery, where many patients who passed away within the facility were laid to rest. Unlike traditional graveyards, these plots are modest, often marked only with simple headstones or numbered markers. Those who venture near the cemetery at night report a range of eerie phenomena. Lights are said to flicker along the rows of graves, and shadows move where no one stands. Some have heard soft cries or whispered names carried on the wind, as if the dead are still trying to communicate with the living. Inside the remaining hospital buildings, the paranormal activity intensifies. Hallways that once echoed with the voices of patients and staff now carry strange noises, the faint murmur of conversation, footsteps pacing on tiled floors, and the distant clang of metal as if restraints or equipment are being handled by invisible hands. Explorers often describe sudden drops in temperature, with icy patches that form in specific corners or rooms, accompanied by the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Some of the most commonly reported experiences involve apparitions. Shadowy figures are said to move along hallways, vanish around corners, or appear briefly in mirrors. In some cases, these figures take more defined forms. A nurse in period uniform, silently moving down the corridor, a patient in a nightgown, staring from the end of a hallway, or a caretaker checking on an empty room. Witnesses often describe a sense of recognition, as though these apparitions are reliving moments from their past lives, unaware or indifferent to the living observers. Auditory phenomena are another hallmark of the Elgin Mental Health Center haunting. Some report hearing doors opening and closing on their own, the shuffle of feet along hallways, and the faint but distinct clanging of equipment that no longer exists. These sounds often seem localized, following visitors from room to room, or originating from areas that should be completely empty. One of the most chilling aspects of the site is its sense of residual emotion. Many who enter the buildings report a feeling of sadness, fear, or anxiety that grows stronger in certain areas. Rooms that once housed patients with severe mental illnesses carry the heaviest emotional weight, with some describing the sensation of invisible hands pressing against their shoulders, cold breath on the back of the neck, or an unshakable sense of despair lingering in the air. These sensations are often accompanied by fleeting glimpses of figures moving in the shadows, only to disappear when approached. Even the exterior of the hospital carries a haunting presence. The grounds, once meticulously maintained, are now overgrown, with pathways and gardens overtaken by weeds. Trees cast twisted shadows under the moonlight, and in the quiet of night, the wind through the branches sounds like faint voices speaking from another time. Visitors sometimes see ghostly lights in upper windows, glimpses of figures moving behind broken glass, or hear the faint rhythm of footsteps on stairs long unused. Despite the decay and abandonment, Elgin Mental Health Center continues to draw the curious and the brave. Urban explorers, paranormal investigators, and thrill seekers come to witness firsthand the lingering presence of the hospital's past. Many leave with stories of inexplicable sounds, sudden chills, and ghostly apparitions, while others describe an overwhelming sense of being observed by those who once called the hospital home. The legend of Elgin Mental Health Center is not just about ghosts. It is about memory, suffering, and the residual energy left by decades of human lives. The experiences reported here suggest that the trauma endured within its walls, the isolation, fear, and pain of countless patients, has left an indelible mark. The buildings themselves seem alive with history, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead feels thin. Grant Hospital in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood was once a sprawling institution, its red brick facade standing as a solemn sentinel over the city. Built in the early 20th century, the hospital was meant to provide modern medical care to the community, a place of healing and hope. Yet, over the decades, the building developed a reputation far darker than its intended purpose. Long before its eventual demolition, Grant Hospital had become synonymous with eerie whispers, strange apparitions, and stories of restless spirits that refused to leave. Former patients and staff alike told tales of the hospital's hallways, where screams could be heard even when the floors were empty. Nurses on the night shift often described a feeling of being watched, a persistent chill that crept up the spine regardless of the temperature. Doors would slam on their own, and the metallic clang of medical equipment, echoing through the halls in the dead of night, became almost routine for those who worked late hours. Some staff reported seeing shadows moving independently of any person, darting across corridors and vanishing into walls, leaving behind an unshakable sense of dread. Patients themselves sometimes spoke of experiences that defied explanation. Those confined to rooms with windows facing the hospital's older wings reported seeing figures standing silently at the foot of their beds, only to disappear when approached. Others recounted hearing faint whispers, calling their names in soft, urgent tones, even when no other patients or staff were nearby. In some cases, patients claimed to witness fleeting glimpses of figures in old hospital gowns wandering the hallways, their faces obscured by shadows, eyes fixed in silent despair. The psychiatric wards of Grant Hospital, in particular, were said to be the epicenter of the supernatural activity. These were areas of profound human suffering, patients battling severe mental illness, isolation, and the harsh treatments of the era. Visitors and former staff often spoke of the oppressive atmosphere, where the weight of decades of fear and pain seemed almost tangible. Some paranormal investigators who ventured into these wards reported recording inexplicable sounds, muffled cries, low moans, and whispers that seemed to move from room to room. EVP recordings captured disembodied voices pleading for help or repeating names, The origin, always impossible to pinpoint. Even the hospital's operating rooms held a chilling legacy. Surgeons and nurses from later decades recalled a feeling of unease, as if the air itself carried memories of past procedures. Some claimed to see fleeting apparitions of doctors or patients, moving silently across the sterile floors. Others reported equipment turning on or off by itself, lights flickering without reason, and the constant sensation that something unseen was observing every move. These occurrences were often dismissed at the time as stress or fatigue. But over the years, a pattern of unexplained phenomena emerged that could not be ignored. The hospital's exterior was no less haunting. At night, the sprawling grounds seemed to take on a life of their own. Walkways would echo with the sound of footsteps even when no one was present, and windows glowed with ghostly light. Many locals reported seeing figures pass behind the glass, moving silently, only to vanish when approached. Trees that lined the property cast long, twisted shadows, and the wind through the branches often sounded eerily like whispers carried from the hospital's interior. Even the nearby streets were said to feel oppressive after dark, as if the energy of the hospital extended beyond its walls. Stories of hauntings persisted long after Grant Hospital fell into disuse. Urban explorers, paranormal enthusiasts, and curious locals ventured into the abandoned buildings, drawn by tales of ghostly activity. Those who entered reported sudden drops in temperature, shadowy figures, and inexplicable noises that followed them from room to room. The sensation of being watched was almost universal, and many left the building shaken, describing the halls as if they were alive with lingering memories of the past. Some even spoke of seeing apparitions in hospital gowns or hearing the sound of distant screams echoing through long-abandoned corridors. Grant Hospital's dark reputation was cemented not only by its abandoned state but by the stories that persisted in the community. Its demolition did little to erase its presence from local folklore. People who lived nearby claimed to see fleeting figures or hear strange sounds in the vicinity where the hospital once stood. Paranormal enthusiasts argue that the building itself may have contained a concentrated energy of suffering and fear. And even when the physical structure was removed, that energy lingered in the soil and air. Copley Hospital in Aurora, Illinois, stands today as a historic reminder of the city's medical past. Its brick can mortar structure, a blend of old architecture and modern renovations. Originally opened in 1888, the hospital served generations of patients, from routine illnesses to critical emergencies, and it became a cornerstone of healthcare in the region. Yet beneath its public facade of professionalism and care, Copley Hospital developed a reputation far more unsettling, one that has persisted long after many of its original wards fell silent. The older sections of the building, with their high ceilings, narrow hallways, and creaking wooden floors, are where most of the reported activity occurs. Urban explorers, paranormal enthusiasts, and even staff members have told stories that make the hair on the back of the neck rise. Some speak of fleeting shadows at the end of hallways, disappearing as soon as they are noticed. Others report hearing doors open and close in empty corridors, and footsteps echoing in rooms where no one has been for decades. The sensations are often accompanied by sudden drops in temperature, as if the air itself remembers the suffering and fear once contained within the walls. Patients who spent time in Copley's old wards, particularly those suffering from prolonged illnesses, may have left behind more than memories. Locals speak of the residual energy that lingers, describing it as heavy, almost tangible, pressing down on anyone who enters certain rooms. Visitors often recount feeling watched, the sensation growing more intense in the hospital's abandoned wings. Some have described the sound of whispers, too faint to understand, yet insistent, as though the building itself is attempting to communicate across decades. One of the more frequently reported phenomena occurs in the former surgical wings. Lights flicker without cause, and medical equipment, long removed, is said to sometimes rattle or hum as if powered by some unseen force. Others have spoken of cold drafts that pass over them in a single sweep, leaving a chill that no modern heating system can explain. The weight of history in these rooms is palpable, a mix of life-saving miracles and unavoidable tragedies. The The hospital's original patient rooms have their own stories. Some visitors describe seeing faces in the old glass windows of doors, or fleeting reflections in mirrors that don't belong to anyone present. Doors often swing open on their own, and chairs topple without explanation. Occasionally, the faint sound of crying or soft murmuring fills the air, usually when the halls are empty and silent. Many who have ventured into these areas report a feeling of unease that grows with every step, as if the building itself is aware of their presence. Stairwells are another hotspot for unexplained activity. The worn steps echo with phantom footsteps, and some explorers have claimed that shadows move against the walls, climbing or descending ahead of them. Even when the stairwells are empty, a persistent sense of being followed remains. Some attribute this to the spirits of patients who died in the hospital, their final moments forever imprinted on the very fabric of the structure. Others believe the energy may come from staff who dedicated their lives to care, lingering long after their own deaths, still walking the halls they once tended. The hospital's basement and utility areas are particularly eerie. Low ceilings, exposed pipes, and narrow corridors create a labyrinth of shadows. Visitors often report hearing the distant sound of water dripping, doors creaking, and metal clanging, even when no machinery or plumbing is running. Some speak of cold, oppressive pockets of air that seem to move along with them, brushing against the skin like invisible hands. A few have claimed to see figures crouched in corners, disappearing when approached, their presence marked only by a sudden drop in temperature and the smell of antiseptic and age. Despite renovations that have modernized parts of the building, the older sections remain steeped in history and the unknown. Paranormal investigators have set up cameras and audio equipment, often capturing unexplained orbs of light, shadow figures, and voices that seem to answer questions posed to empty rooms. Residents in the surrounding neighborhood occasionally report seeing figures in old nurse uniforms standing at the windows after dark, or hearing muffled voices from within the walls. The hospital, though structurally sound and open for limited tours or historical visits, retains an atmosphere of unease that no amount of restoration can fully erase. Copley Hospital's legend is reinforced by the stories of those who have dared to explore its more haunted areas. Some claim that certain rooms have memory, replaying moments of suffering, grief, and even hope, imprinted on the air itself. Others speak of fleeting glimpses of former patients, their presence subtle yet undeniable, lingering between the old brick walls. For urban explorers, the thrill is palpable, but the experience often leaves them shaken, with lingering questions about what is truly left behind by the lives once lived there. St. Luke's Hospital Complex in Chicago, Illinois, stands as a striking example of Gothic Revival architecture. Its stone spires and pointed arches evoking both grandeur and an unsettling solemnity. Founded in 1864, the hospital quickly became a center for medical care in the city, treating everything from routine illnesses to the critical injuries that urban life sometimes brought. Yet beyond its historical significance, St. Luke's has earned a darker reputation. Whispered among locals, urban explorers, and paranormal enthusiasts alike, the hospital is not only a relic of Chicago's medical past, but also a place where shadows of the past seem to linger long after the patients have gone. Walking through the older sections of St. Luke's, visitors often report a heavy, oppressive atmosphere, as if the very walls hold on to the echoes of lives lived and lost. The stone corridors, high ceilings, and narrow hallways create perfect acoustics for sounds that should not exist. Doors creak and bang without explanation. Footsteps echo along empty corridors, and faint whispers drift through the air, too soft to understand but too persistent to ignore. Some claim the whispers are the remnants of former patients or staff, voices stuck between worlds, trying to reach anyone who will listen. The hospital's abandoned wings are especially notorious. In these areas, light seems to bend strangely. Shadows shift without cause, and sudden cold spots appear in the middle of otherwise warm rooms. Visitors have reported seeing figures in white gowns or long coats, moving down the hallways and vanishing when approached. Many describe the feeling of being watched, even when completely alone, as if unseen eyes follow their every step. Some who have lingered too long feel a sudden pressure on their shoulders or a chill brushing against their skin, sensations that no modern ventilation system can explain. The former surgical suites are among the most active areas of paranormal activity. Here, lights flicker erratically, and some equipment, long removed, seems to rattle as if used by invisible hands. Several urban explorers claim to have seen figures dressed as nurses and doctors moving between operating tables, shadows flickering in the corners of their vision before disappearing entirely. Others have reported the faint smell of antiseptic, mingled with the metallic tints of blood, lingering even in rooms that have been cleaned and sealed for decades. The surgical wings carry the weight of countless lives saved and countless others lost, leaving an energy that some believe cannot be contained or forgotten. Patient rooms, too, are steeped in legend. In the old wards, reflections appear in mirrors where no one stands, and lights switch on and off, seemingly on their own. Doors swing open with no breeze to move them, and chairs sometimes topple without explanation. A recurring phenomenon reported by visitors is the sound of soft crying or murmured conversations when the halls are otherwise empty. Many feel compelled to leave quickly, overcome by the heaviness of the past pressing down upon them. Stairwells and service corridors are hotspots for shadowy activity. The worn steps echo with phantom footsteps, sometimes matching the pace of those ascending or descending. Shadows dart across the walls, disappearing when investigated, leaving only a fleeting sense of unease. Urban explorers describe feeling a presence behind them that moves independently of their own steps, a cold pressure that brushes against their back as they climb. Some believe these are the echoes of staff and patients who spent their final days navigating these same corridors. Their stories etched into the very wood and stone. The basement and utility areas of St. Luke's are labyrinthian, filled with low ceilings, exposed pipes, and narrow walkways. Here, the atmosphere is thick with a sense of lingering energy. Dripping water, distant bangs, and the occasional metallic clang are commonly reported. Though no machinery is operational, cold spots appear and vanish unpredictably, and some explorers claim to have glimpsed crouched figures in the shadows, vanishing when approached. Many describe the basement as the heart of the hospital's hauntings, the place where the past is most tangible and the line between living and dead feels thinnest. Despite renovations and ongoing efforts to maintain the complex as a historical site, the older sections of St. Luke's retain an aura of unease that modernization cannot erase. Paranormal investigators have documented orbs of light, unexplained shadows, and faint, disembodied voices on audio recorders. Residents nearby occasionally report seeing figures in old nurse uniforms at the windows after dark, or hearing whispers carried on the wind from the direction of the hospital. The building's history of care, suffering, and death seems inseparable from the structure itself, leaving a presence that some visitors feel as soon as they step onto the grounds. Creeping through St. Luke's Hospital complex, one cannot help but feel the weight of decades of human experience. The walls seem to hum with residual energy, a combination of grief, hope, and the echo of countless moments of life and death. Visitors are often left with more questions than answers, a lingering sense that the hospital remembers them long after they leave. For those who enter the older wings, the shadows, whispers, and cold spots serve as a chilling reminder. St. Luke's is not merely a historic site, but a resting place for memories and spirits forever. Entwined with the building's storied past, Mound City Civil War Naval Hospital in Illinois stands as a silent testament to the horrors and heroism of the past. Established in 1861, at the height of the Civil War, the hospital was constructed along the banks of the Ohio River to treat Union soldiers wounded in nearby battles, particularly those along the Mississippi and its tributary. For its time, the facility was state-of-the-art, with rows of wards, operating rooms, and recovery halls sprawling across its campus. Yet, while the hospital was meant to heal the living, it also became a place where countless soldiers took their last breaths, leaving an indelible mark on the grounds. Today, the site is largely abandoned, but stories of paranormal activity continue to draw the curious, historians, and ghost hunters alike. Walking through the remains of Mound City Naval Hospital, visitors often describe an oppressive weight in the air. A heavy stillness that seems to press against the chest. The empty corridors echo in strange ways, carrying the sound of footsteps, doors creaking, and soft moans where no one walks. Those familiar with the site report that the hospital seems alive at night, filled with the lingering energy of soldiers who once occupied its halls. Shadows flit across empty rooms, and the faint smell of gunpowder and antiseptic occasionally drifts through the air, conjuring a time when the building was filled with the chaos of wartime medicine. The wards, long abandoned and stripped of most equipment, are hotspots for eerie phenomena. Visitors recount seeing uniformed figures pacing the hallways, their forms blurred as if caught between worlds. Some are said to carry stretchers or wheel empty gurneys, moving with a deliberate pace that reflects the urgency of battlefield injuries. Others simply stand at the ends of hallways, staring silently at anyone who enters, their expressions unreadable and ghostly pale. When approached, these apparitions vanish into thin air, leaving behind only the faint scent of sweat, blood, and decay, a reminder of the suffering that took place here. Operating rooms and surgical areas are particularly unsettling. During the Civil War, these spaces were often filled with the groans of men awaiting amputation or treatment for horrific injuries. Today, visitors have reported hearing the metallic clatter of surgical tools and the faint drip of fluids, even though the rooms have long been cleared of equipment. Some claim to hear surgeons' voices, giving orders, or nurses whispering instructions, as though the hospital still functions in a spectral echo of its past. The faint groan of wounded men sometimes reverberates through the halls, a chilling reminder of the lives lost and the pain endured within these walls. The hospital's administrative areas are not spared from paranormal activity. Offices and record rooms, once filled with ledgers and patient files, now lie in decay, yet visitors report paper rustling, filing cabinets slamming shut, and phantom footsteps pacing in and out. It is as if the records of the past themselves have gained sentience, whispering the names and fates of those who were treated here. Outside, the grounds surrounding the hospital are equally haunted. Soldiers who died from injuries or disease were often buried nearby in hastily dug graves, many unmarked. Locals say that on foggy evenings, figures can be seen walking among the trees and gravestones, carrying lanterns and speaking in low, urgent tones. Some have reported seeing groups of soldiers forming as if preparing to march, only to dissolve into mist before the eyes of onlookers. The Ohio River, flowing silently past the hospital, seems to carry whispers and faint cannon fire, as though the battles fought nearby have left a permanent echo in the landscape. Visitors frequently report cold spots and sudden drops in temperature, particularly in the center of hallways or near stairwells. Objects move without explanation, doors open and close on their own, and shadows appear to stretch and twist along walls. EVP recordings conducted by paranormal investigators have captured groans, indistinct murmurs, and even calls for help, giving chilling testimony to the soldiers' restless spirits. Many describe a sense of being followed, watched, or even lightly touched, despite the halls being empty. Despite decades of decay, the hospital retains a palpable connection to its history. The spirits of Mound City Civil War Naval Hospital are said to be drawn to those who respect the past, lingering to share echoes of their lives, while reacting to those who dismiss or mock the tragedy. Visitors often leave with an eerie sense of having stepped into a place where the line between the living and the dead is thin, where time folds back on itself, and the sacrifices of soldiers are never forgotten. Bartonville Insane Asylum, once a sprawling complex in central Illinois, has long held a notorious reputation for the unsettling and the unexplained. Opened in the late 1800s, the facility was built to house individuals deemed mentally ill at a time when treatment was harsh, experimental, and often cruel. Over the decades, thousands of patients passed through its halls, many arriving against their will, some never to leave alive. The stories of suffering, despair, and the inhumane conditions that defined the asylum have left a lingering presence, a ghostly imprint that continues to capture the imagination of paranormal enthusiasts and historians alike. Despite being demolished decades ago, the grounds where Bartonville Insane Asylum once stood remain steeped in tales of ghostly activity. Visitors report an oppressive sense of dread upon entering the area, as if the air itself remembers the torment of its former inhabitants. The landscape, though now empty and overgrown, seems to echo with past whispers and fleeting shadows. People who wander near the old foundation lines speak of hearing muffled cries and footsteps, disembodied voices that seem to come from nowhere, yet carry a weight of human pain. Accounts from those who explored the asylum before its demolition are chilling. In the older sections, which were the first to be constructed, visitors describe hallways that seem impossibly long, with corners that obscure light and create an unsettling sense of disorientation. Doors would slam shut on their own, or creak open just enough to let a draft slip through. Many reported seeing figures in the distant patients in tattered clothing, sometimes seated on benches, staring blankly ahead. When approached, these figures would vanish, leaving only the heavy silence of the abandoned asylum. The treatment rooms and former operating theaters were hotspots for eerie phenomena. In its operational years, the asylum employed a range of practices now considered unethical, from electroshock therapy to lobotomies. Today, those same rooms seem to hold the residue of trauma. Explorers recall hearing faint buzzing, like old electrical equipment, and the sound of faint crying or whispers in a language that seemed almost primal. Some claim to see shadowy figures moving along the walls, performing tasks long abandoned, as though the past refuses to leave. Visitors often mention the lingering scent of antiseptic and decay, a combination that seems to appear and vanish with no clear source. Certain rooms are said to radiate an unnatural cold, a chill that penetrates deep into the bones, leaving even the most skeptical uneasy. Many who have ventured alone report a sensation of being watched, or light touches on their shoulders, accompanied by whispers of words they cannot fully understand. Cameras left behind by investigators sometimes capture strange orbs of light hovering in the corners of rooms, moving erratically as though alive. The asylum's grounds, especially near the old cemetery where many patients were buried, are similarly haunted. Tombstones, some barely legible, mark the resting places of forgotten individuals. On moonless nights, witnesses have reported seeing figures walking among the graves, their forms faint and translucent. Some appear to be reenacting moments from their lives within the asylum, an orderly pacing back and forth, a patient sitting on the ground weeping while others seem to simply drift, lost and searching. The rustle of leaves in the wind sometimes carries voices, soft and mournful, calling out names long forgotten. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site often speak of a palpable sense of anguish lingering over the entire area. EVP recordings capture faint moans, incoherent whispers, and, in rare cases, cries of desperation. Even decades after the buildings were torn down, some claim to see shadowy figures moving through the overgrown ruins, or glimpses of faces pressed against windows that no longer exist. The story suggests that the spirits of Bartonville Insane Asylum were not at peace. They linger, caught between the world of the living and the dead, unwilling or unable to move on. Local legend adds to the chilling reputation. Residents of Bartonville have shared tales of visitors who reported car engines stalling near the site, radios turning to static, and sudden cold gusts that seem to follow them along the road. Some believe that anyone who dares to trespass on the former asylum grounds risks being drawn into the echoes of suffering, pulled into a world of anguish and confusion. Others claim that the site acts as a magnet for restless souls, its dark history anchoring them to the location long after the physical structures have disappeared. Even today, the memory of Bartonville Insane Asylum is alive in local folklore. Stories of ghostly patients, shadowed figures, and inexplicable noises continue to circulate, drawing thrill-seekers, historians, and paranormal investigators. The haunting is not the result of a single tragic event, but a culmination of decades of pain, neglect, and suffering that left an enduring imprint on the land. Chicago State Hospital, once a sprawling psychiatric facility on the south side of Chicago, carries a reputation as one of the city's most haunted locations. Established in the early 1900s, the hospital treated thousands of patients over the decades, many suffering from severe mental illness at a time when treatment was rudimentary and often inhumane. The sprawling campus housed multiple buildings, including dormitories, treatment wards, and administrative offices, creating a labyrinthine environment where the echoes of suffering could linger long after the patients themselves had passed. From its early years, the hospital was a place of strict discipline, with rules that left little room for comfort or humanity. Patients were subjected to treatments that ranged from the painful to the experimental, including electroshock therapy, isolation, and cold baths. Stories of mistreatment and neglect were common, and though staff often believed they were helping, many patients never recovered, leaving behind a legacy of trauma that some say has never faded. Even after its closure, visitors report an unsettling presence on the property. The older buildings, in particular, seem to hold the memories of those who suffered most. People exploring the site speak of an overwhelming sense of sadness, a heaviness in the air that presses on the chest. Footsteps echo through empty hallways, though no one is there. Doors creak open and shut on their own, and the faint smell of antiseptic, mixed with something more pungent and decayed, lingers in the corners of abandoned rooms. Sightings of ghostly figures are common. Some reports seeing patients dressed in early 20th century hospital gowns, wandering aimlessly through the hallways or sitting silently on the edges of beds. Others claim to have glimpsed nurses moving between rooms, their faces pale and eyes vacant, performing tasks as if the building were still in use. When approached, these figures vanish, leaving only the chilling reminder that the hospital's past is not gone. It remains, lingering like a shadow. Certain areas of the campus are particularly active. The old treatment wards, where patients endured some of the harshest therapies, are said to resonate with low moans and whispers. Explorers have captured faint cries on recording devices, sometimes calling out names or repeating pleas for help. The cafeteria and common areas, once filled with chatter and activity, now echo with laughter that quickly turns to sobbing, and the sound of chairs scraping across floors when no one is present. The hospital grounds themselves are also steeped in paranormal activity. The surrounding courtyards and walkways, where patients were allowed brief time outside, reportedly host shadowy figures moving between trees and shrubs. On overcast days, some visitors claim to see fleeting glimpses of people in early 1900s clothing standing silently, staring toward the hospital before disappearing entirely. The cemetery on the property, where many patients were interred without ceremony, is particularly eerie. At night, visitors have reported hearing soft weeping, and some have claimed to see figures kneeling beside the gravestones, as though tending to someone long gone. Urban explorers and paranormal investigators describe a persistent feeling of being watched. Some speak of sudden cold spots, inexplicable gusts of wind, and doors that slam shut with no source of cause. Electronic devices often malfunction in the older buildings, with cameras and recording equipment capturing static, distorted voices, and unexplained lights. Many who have spent more than a few hours on the property describe a growing unease, a sensation that the hospital's past is pressing in from all sides. Local legend has grown around the haunted history of Chicago State Hospital. Stories circulate of former patients whose suffering has bound them to the grounds, unwilling or unable to move on. Some claim that the spirits are not hostile, but are trapped, reliving moments of fear, pain, and confusion. Others report a more sinister presence, shadowed figures that seem to follow visitors, disappearing when approached, but returning again when one looks away. Even decades after its closure, the hospital remains a place where history and haunting intertwine. The walls, once filled with the cries and voices of patients, continue to resonate with echoes of the past. Witnesses report hearing conversations that never happened, footsteps that cannot be traced, and fleeting glimpses of people who vanish before their eyes. The combination of real historical suffering and lingering paranormal activity has made Chicago State Hospital a magnet for thrill seekers, historians, and ghost hunters alike. The chilling allure of Chicago State Hospital lies not just in the stories of hauntings, but in the weight of its history. The suffering endured within its walls left an imprint, one that continues to manifest in whispers, shadows, and unexplained phenomena. Visitors speak of an almost tangible presence, as though the memories of decades of pain have seeped into the very foundations of the buildings. Jacksonville Developmental Center, located in Jacksonville, Illinois, has long carried a reputation as one of the most haunted sites in the state. Established in 1851 as the Illinois State Asylum and Hospital for the Insane, the facility was created during an era when mental health care was in its infancy. Over the decades, thousands of patients passed through its doors, many subjected to harsh treatments and conditions that would be considered cruel by today's standards. The center was intended as a place of care and rehabilitation, but the reality often fell far short, leaving a legacy of suffering that some say still lingers within its walls. From the earliest years, Jacksonville Developmental Center struggled with overcrowding, inadequate staffing, and limited resources. Patients were often confined in large, bare wards with little privacy or comfort. Treatments ranged from the experimental to the extreme, including electroconvulsive therapy, cold baths, and physical restraints. Those who showed symptoms the staff could not manage were sometimes left in isolation for days or weeks at a time. The echoes of this suffering, it is said, remain, manifesting as strange sounds, moving shadows, and cold spots that visitors report experiencing today. Even now, decades after many of the original buildings were closed or repurposed, the center remains a focal point for paranormal activity. Visitors describe an overwhelming sense of unease as they walk through the older wings, where the walls seem to press inward and the air grows heavy. Some claim to hear whispers calling their names or faint conversations carried through empty corridors. The sounds are often indistinct, but the tone carries unmistakable desperation, as if the voices of past residents are still pleading for attention or assistance. Many accounts focus on the older patient dormitories and treatment areas. Witnesses report seeing figures dressed in period clothing moving between rooms or sitting quietly in corners, only to vanish when approached. Some describe seeing patients standing silently by windows, staring out at nothing, or pacing hallways as though waiting for someone who will never come. Others have seen nurses and staff in outdated uniforms, performing tasks that can no longer be explained, adjusting bed linens, preparing trays of food, or quietly walking the halls. These apparitions often disappear suddenly, leaving only the faintest impression of movement and the sensation that the space is still very much occupied. Unexplained phenomena are not limited to sightings. Many visitors report objects moving on their own, doors opening and closing without cause, and lights flickering in unoccupied rooms. Temperature drops, sudden gusts of cold air, and static electricity that disrupts electronic equipment are also common. Some paranormal investigators have recorded EVP, electronic voice phenomena, that capture low moans, cries for help, and disembodied voices repeating phrases like "please" or "I can't stay." The recordings suggest a lingering presence, a collection of souls unable to find peace after decades of hardship. Outside the buildings, the grounds themselves hold an unsettling energy. Overgrown paths, abandoned outbuildings, and quiet courtyards all seem to resonate with echoes of the past. Those who walk the property after dark often report shadows moving between trees or fleeting glimpses of figures crossing the walkways. Some say that even the wind carries whispers, and that the center's history of confinement and suffering has left a tangible imprint on the landscape. Stories of the center's hauntings have circulated among locals and visitors alike. Many describe an almost palpable sadness, a heavy feeling of being watched, and the sensation that the walls themselves remember the pain endured within. It is not uncommon for investigators to feel physically drained after spending time in the older wings, as if the very atmosphere absorbs energy from anyone who enters. While some apparitions seem benign or merely curious, others are reported to be more unsettling: doors slamming in sudden bursts, unexplained shadows darting across hallways, or the sound of footsteps following visitors, even when they are alone. The Jacksonville Developmental Center stands as a stark reminder of both the history of mental health care and the human suffering that accompanied it. Its reputation as a haunted site is not just a result of folklore. The numerous accounts from witnesses, investigators, and former staff suggest that something of the past has endured. The cries, whispers, and fleeting apparitions seem to exist in a space between memory and reality, a manifestation of decades of pain that cannot be fully contained by walls or time. Even in its modern incarnation, the center retains the weight of its history. The old buildings, though partially renovated or abandoned, continue to draw those interested in the paranormal, history, or simply the thrill of encountering something beyond the ordinary. The stories of shadowy figures, cold spots, unexplained voices, and the overwhelming sense of being watched remain consistent across decades of reports. For many, visiting the Jacksonville Developmental Center is not merely an exploration of a historic site, it is a confrontation with the echoes of suffering and the presence of those who remain tied to the location long after their physical lives have ended. Edgewater Medical Center, located along the northern stretch of Chicago, has long been whispered about among urban explorers and paranormal enthusiasts. Once a functioning hospital, it now stands abandoned, its empty halls echoing with decades of history and sorrow. Built in the early 20th century, the center served thousands of patients over the years, offering medical care at a time when hospitals were both places of hope and fear. Yet, behind the promise of healing, the facility accumulated a dark legacy, stories of suffering, sudden deaths, and mistreatment that linger in the building's shadowed corners. Even in its operational years, Edgewater Medical Center had an unsettling reputation. Staff and patients alike reported strange occurrences, lights flickering inexplicably, doors opening and closing on their own, and the sensation of unseen presences in otherwise empty rooms. Hospital administrators often dismissed these reports as stress or exhaustion, but those who experienced them knew something was different. The hospital seemed to breathe, its walls holding memories of pain and desperation that could not be silenced. After its closure, the abandoned center became a magnet for thrill-seekers and investigators of the paranormal. Walking through the halls, many describe an oppressive weight, a sense of being watched, and the unmistakable feeling that the past is very much alive within the decaying structure. The older sections of the hospital, once surgical wings, treatment rooms, and patient wards, are the epicenter of most reports. Shadows move along the walls, often disappearing when approached, and disembodied voices echo down long, empty corridors. Some visitors have described hearing footsteps pacing above or beside them, even when the upper floors are structurally inaccessible. One of the most chilling aspects of Edgewater Medical Center is its array of unexplained sounds. Visitors report sudden bangs, the clatter of unseen objects, and muffled whispers that seem to come from empty rooms. Others have captured EVP's electronic voice, phenomena where indistinct murmurs, cries for help, or sharp exclamations appear on recording devices. Despite the area being completely silent during the recording, many of these voices are described as urgent, almost pleading, carrying a sense of unfinished business. Sightings of apparitions are not uncommon. Shadowy figures are often glimpsed moving through the hallways, sometimes appearing as patients in outdated clothing. At other times, as staff performing tasks no longer needed. Witnesses speak of fleeting glimpses of a nurse adjusting a bed, a doctor checking an empty tray, or patients sitting silently, staring into nothing. Some visitors have claimed to see figures in the corner of their vision, only to turn and find empty rooms. Others describe full-bodied apparitions that vanish when approached, leaving behind a chill in the air and an echoing sense of unease. The hospital's abandoned environment amplifies the eerie experiences. Decaying walls, broken tiles, and shattered windows provide a haunting backdrop, while the remnants of its past trusted medical equipment, old beds, and peeling paint create a tangible link to the lives that once passed through its doors. The combination of history, neglect, and residual energy seems to heighten the intensity of the paranormal phenomena reported by visitors. Many feel as if the building itself remembers every scream, every cry, every quiet desperation. And that memory manifests in ways that cannot be explained by logic. Some investigators suggest that the energy concentrated in Edgewater Medical Center is tied to the intense emotions of those who suffered within its walls. Deaths, prolonged illness, and the fear of the unknown left marks that linger, creating pockets of residual energy that replay like echoes through time. This theory is supported by the fact that most phenomena are reported in areas associated with intense human activity. Former patient wards, surgical rooms, and treatment areas where life and death decisions were made daily. Despite the risks, Edgewater Medical Center continues to draw the curious. Paranormal enthusiasts enter the building equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and EMF meters, hoping to capture evidence of the unseen. Many leave with footage of unexplained lights, shadows moving independently of natural causes, or audio recordings containing whispers, footsteps, or cries. Others report intense feelings of dread, nausea, or dizziness, as though the building actively interacts with visitors, testing their courage and resolve. Local legend has it that the hospital will always retain its haunting. Generations of patients and staff who experienced fear, suffering, and death have left imprints on the space, creating a complex tapestry of paranormal activity. Those who explore the hospital speak not only of seeing ghosts, but of sensing the emotional residue of the past grief, fear, and unfulfilled longing manifesting in ways that defy explanation. Edgewater Medical Center, even in its abandoned state, serves as a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the intensity of human suffering. The empty hallways, broken windows, and decaying infrastructure are more than just remnants of a building. They are silent witnesses to decades of history. Visitors consistently report that the spirits within seem aware, watching, waiting, and sometimes reaching out in subtle, unsettling ways. Lincoln State School and Colony in Lincoln, Illinois, is a place steeped in both history and sorrow. Founded in the early 20th century, the facility was established to care for individuals with developmental disabilities, a mission rooted in compassion, but often carried out under harsh conditions. Over the decades, the sprawling campus became a self-contained world of dormitories, classrooms, workshops, and medical buildings, housing thousands of residents. Yet behind the walls of care and routine, there were whispers of mistreatment, neglect, and suffering, and those echoes now linger long after the doors closed. Today, the Lincoln State School sits abandoned, its buildings decaying under years of disuse. Broken windows, rusting gates, and crumbling walls are all that remain of what was once a busy campus. But the physical decay is only part of its story. Locals and urban explorers alike speak of a pervasive, oppressive atmosphere that hangs over the property, an intangible sense that the past here refuses to rest. The facility is widely regarded as haunted, with countless reports of strange phenomena, footsteps echoing in empty corridors, doors opening and closing on their own, and distant voices whispering through the halls. Many visitors report experiencing a heavy feeling of being watched as soon as they step onto the grounds. Hallways that should be silent hum with energy, and stairwells seem to echo with the hurried steps of people long gone. Those who explore the former dormitories often hear faint murmurs or soft singing, as if residents are continuing routines that ended decades ago. Some have captured audio recordings where indistinct voices cry out for attention, while others have described seeing shadowy figures flicker past doorways or vanish around corners. One of the most chilling aspects of Lincoln State School is the sheer number of ghostly interactions reported in the older wings. In these areas, visitors claim that the air grows cold without explanation, and lights flicker even when electricity is disconnected. Chairs move on their own, beds shift slightly, and some have even reported feeling unseen hands brush against their shoulders as they pass through the halls. The lingering energy seems strongest in areas that once housed residents who suffered or died while living at the facility, suggesting that these spaces retain the imprint of human emotion. The grounds themselves are no less unnerving. Abandoned playgrounds, overgrown sports fields, and decaying workshops give the campus a surreal, frozen in-time quality. Many explorers report hearing the squeak of swings in the empty playground, or the distant clang of metal from a workshop long closed. At night, the shadows of trees stretch across the cracked pavement like long fingers, and the wind seems to carry faint echoes of laughter, cries, and whispered commands. Former employees and local historians have suggested that the restless energy stems from decades of intense emotion, fear, sadness, anger, and frustration, all concentrated within the walls of the institution. Stories of residents being isolated, restrained, or neglected, combined with the deaths that occurred on the grounds, have left a kind of psychic residue. Paranormal investigators believe that Lincoln State School acts as a repository for these lingering energies, replaying fragments of past trauma for anyone who enters. Visitors have also reported phenomena that suggest more interactive spirits. Some claim to see figures standing silently in doorways or looking out windows, only to vanish when approached. Others recount hearing footsteps follow them down hallways or behind locked doors. There are accounts of fleeting glimpses of individuals in old-fashioned clothing, sitting at tables, walking in hallways, or performing tasks as if the institution were still in operation. The apparitions are often described as sad, sometimes pleading, a reflection of the residents' unfulfilled lives and lost potential. Despite the dangers, Lincoln State School continues to draw curiosity seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. Equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and other investigative tools, they attempt to capture evidence of the unexplainable. Many leave with footage of unexplained shadows, flickering lights, or audio of disembodied voices. Others report experiencing intense feelings of anxiety, dizziness, or nausea while inside, as if the building itself is interacting with them, testing their courage. The abandoned nature of Lincoln State School amplifies the haunting experience. Empty hallways, decaying furniture, and remnants of medical equipment create a tangible link to the past. The building is more than just a structure, it is a repository of memory, carrying the imprints of countless lives once lived within its walls. Walking through it, one can feel the weight of the years, the accumulation of human suffering and care, and the echoes of those who never truly left. For those who explore Lincoln State School, the experience is often described as a journey into the past, a glimpse of lives frozen in time. It serves as a haunting reminder of how history, trauma, and human emotion can linger in spaces long after they are abandoned. The spirits of the former residents, staff, and even the forgotten stories of the institution continue to whisper through the empty halls, offering a haunting testament to the building's enduring legacy. Montano Insane Asylum in Montano, Illinois, is a location steeped in darkness and mystery, a place where the lines between history and the supernatural blur. Though often overshadowed by nearby Montano State Hospital, this facility carved its own grim legacy over decades of operation. Originally constructed in the late 19th century to care for the mentally ill, the asylum quickly grew into a sprawling campus filled with dormitories, treatment wings, administrative buildings, and recreational areas. While its mission was to provide care, the reality within its walls was far more complex and tragic, leaving a lasting mark on both the living and the departed. Visitors and paranormal enthusiasts report a chilling atmosphere that permeates the abandoned structures. Even during daylight hours, the grounds feel oppressively heavy, as if every corner, hallway, and room is saturated with decades of human suffering. The asylum's architecture, a mix of brick and mortar, with long, narrow hallways and towering windows only, intensifies the sense of desolation. Broken panes, rusted gates, and overgrown paths hint at neglect, but they also frame the lingering presence of spirits who refuse to leave. Many witnesses recount strange auditory experiences that cannot be explained. Footsteps echo along hallways long devoid of human activity, as though patients or staff continue their routines from a bygone era. Doors slam unexpectedly, and light fixtures flicker without electrical cause. Some visitors describe faint murmurs, disembodied laughter, or whispered names carried across the corridors. On particularly cold days, the temperature seems to drop inexplicably, accompanied by a sense of being watched or followed. The asylum's dormitories are especially active in paranormal reports. Former patient rooms are often filled with a suffocating sense of sadness. Chairs and furniture sometimes shift slightly on their own, and the faint scent of antiseptic lingering long after cleaning can be detected in areas that have been abandoned for decades. Many speculate that these manifestations are the echoes of patients who endured painful treatments, isolation, and neglect during their time in the facility. The treatment wings, where electroshock therapy and other now outdated procedures were administered, are another hotspot for supernatural activity. Urban explorers and paranormal investigators report seeing shadowy figures near the walls, and in some cases, glowing orbs hovering in the air. EVP recordings have captured whispers that seem to call out for help, as well as cries of fear and confusion. Some visitors even report sudden physical sensations, chills running up the spine, unexplained pressure on the shoulders, or the feeling of being touched by an invisible hand. One of the most chilling stories associated with Montano Insane Asylum involves the recreational halls. Long abandoned, these spaces were once filled with activities meant to stimulate and comfort patients. Now, they are often the site of unexplained phenomena. People have reported hearing the faint sound of pianos playing, children's laughter, or the shuffle of feet across the floor. Occasionally, shadowy figures appear to be moving furniture, opening doors, or pacing silently along the corridors, vanishing as soon as one tries to approach. Outside, the grounds themselves are equally unnerving. Overgrown gardens, empty courtyards, and rusted playground equipment seem to carry their own stories. Some witnesses have seen silhouettes moving between the trees, or figures sitting on benches that should be empty. At night, the wind through the broken windows and overgrown foliage can sound like whispers, carrying fragmented conversations from the past. Those who explore the property report an overwhelming sense that the asylum is alive with memory. With the echoes of those who suffered, worked, and died, they're still present. The asylum's cemetery adds another layer of mystery. Many patients who passed away were interred in unmarked graves, leaving their final resting places a secret even today. Paranormal enthusiasts often claim that these grounds are highly active, with ghostly figures walking silently between gravestones, and sometimes vanishing when approached. Some say that on certain nights, the cemetery hums with faint singing or chanting, as if the dead are replaying fragments of their lives. Former staff members have occasionally shared their own eerie experiences. Many recount unexplained noises, fleeting shadows, and a persistent sense of unease that followed them long after leaving the facility. Patients themselves, according to anecdotal accounts, sometimes interacted with unseen presences, talking or gesturing to empty spaces. These collective stories suggest that Montano Insane Asylum is not merely haunted, it is a place where the echoes of human emotion, tragedy, and unresolved suffering persist with a life of their own. Despite its ominous reputation, Montano Insane Asylum continues to draw curious explorers, historians, and paranormal investigators. Equipped with cameras, audio devices, and other tools, they seek evidence of the unexplainable. Many leave with chilling photographs of shadowy figures, recordings of inexplicable sounds, or an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Some report feeling a deep sadness or anxiety while on the grounds, as though the building itself communicates the pain of its past inhabitants. Montano Insane Asylum is more than a forgotten institution. It is a repository of memory, pain, and lingering spirits. Every hallway, room, and courtyard tells a story, some of care, many of suffering. For those who step onto its grounds, it is impossible not to feel the weight of history pressing in, to sense the restless energy that refuses to fade. The asylum stands as a haunting reminder of how human emotion, tragedy, and neglect can linger, echoing long after the last patient has departed and the doors have closed. Peoria Asylum, in Peoria, Illinois, once stood as a sprawling complex, a massive institution designed to care for the mentally ill in a time when mental health treatment was often cruel and misguided. Though the building was eventually demolished, the stories of its dark past and lingering spirits continue to circulate, captivating paranormal enthusiasts and historians alike. The asylum's reputation for hauntings began decades before its destruction, rooted in a history of overcrowding, mistreatment, and unexplained tragedies. During its peak, Peoria Asylum housed hundreds of patients in long, austere hallways lined with locked doors and barred windows. Visitors often report that even photographs of the remaining structures convey a sense of foreboding, as though the walls themselves still remember the suffering they contained. Witnesses describe an overwhelming heaviness in the air, a mixture of sadness, fear, and unease that seems to press down on anyone who dares to step onto the grounds. Even after demolition, locals speak of the energy lingering, particularly in areas where the foundations remain or where the surrounding grounds still bear faint outlines of the original buildings. Reports from those who explored the asylum before its demolition are chilling. Footsteps echo along empty corridors where no one has walked in decades. Doors creak open and shut on their own, and cold drafts sweep through rooms that should be sealed off. Many who entered alone describe feeling unseen hands brushing against their shoulders or the back of their necks, a sensation of being followed by invisible eyes. Visitors have reported hearing faint murmurs of conversation or cries of distress emanating from rooms that no longer exist. The most unsettling are the stories of seeing figures in period clothing, patients and staff, alike wandering through hallways, pausing as if aware of the living intruder, then vanishing into thin air. The asylum's older wings, where patients were kept for the most extended periods, were particularly active with paranormal phenomena. Long rows of patient rooms contained only traces of the past: cracked plaster, faded paint, and broken furniture. But those empty spaces were alive with energy. People reported whispers calling their names, footsteps pacing along the hallways, and even shadowy figures moving behind shattered glass. Some explorers claimed to hear the low moans of a patient in distress, or the distant sound of chains rattling, echoing across abandoned floors. These phenomena were often strongest in the late evening, as if the building itself came alive when night fell. Another consistent report involved the asylum's treatment areas. Peoria Asylum, like many institutions of its time, employed now outdated procedures such as restraints, isolation rooms, and harsh therapies. Paranormal witnesses described the lingering impressions of fear and pain in these spaces. Shadowy figures were observed sitting in the corners of rooms, sometimes appearing to watch visitors with empty eyes. Some reported sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature and the sensation of being pushed or guided along certain hallways. EVP recordings captured faint whispers of names and fragmented sentences, often asking for help or repeating phrases like "please," "don't leave me," and "I can't move." Even the asylum's common areas, once filled with the sounds of daily life, laughter, conversation, and music, took on a spectral quality. Visitors reported hearing faint piano music, the shuffle of feet on worn floors, and echoes of voices that seemed to call out from long ago. In the dining halls, plates and chairs sometimes appeared to move slightly on their own, and the faint smell of antiseptic or old medicine would suddenly fill the air. Those who explored in groups often described the sensation of being watched, with some claiming that the air itself seemed to pulse with the emotional residue of decades of human suffering. Overgrown gardens, crumbling pathways, and the remnants of old recreational areas added to the sense that the asylum was a place where time had stopped. Several visitors reported seeing fleeting shadows between trees or figures crossing the open lawns, vanishing when approached. Some claimed to see silhouettes in the windows of buildings that had long been boarded up, as though the past residents were still peering out at the world they left behind. Even after the asylum was demolished, the stories continued. Paranormal enthusiasts and locals alike claimed that the energy of Peoria Asylum never truly left. Strange lights are sometimes seen flickering where the buildings once stood, and unexplained sounds, like the distant echo of footsteps or faint whispers, continue to be reported by those passing through the area at night. Some say that on certain evenings, the air feels heavy with sadness, and a chill runs through the landscape, as if the spirits of the asylum's former patients are moving unseen, still caught between worlds. Alton Asylum, located in Alton, Illinois, stands today as a silent monument to the troubled past of psychiatric care in America. Established in the late 19th century, the institution was originally built to house those deemed mentally ill. A place meant to provide care, but often delivering suffering instead. Over decades, the asylum became a repository for the forgotten and the tormented, and its walls absorbed the echoes of pain, despair, and unspoken anguish. Though the building has been closed for years, it has not been forgotten. Locals, historians, and thrill-seekers alike are drawn to its looming structure, and tales of hauntings have grown as persistent as the ivy climbing its crumbling brick facade. Walking past the empty grounds of Alton Asylum, one cannot help but notice the air of oppressive stillness. Windows, many of them shattered, reveal darkened interiors where shadows seem to move of their own accord. Residents in nearby neighborhoods often speak of odd noises drifting from the site during the dead of night. Some hear muffled screams or weeping that carries on the wind, while others report the sound of heavy chains rattling or doors slamming without any apparent cause. The asylum's isolation, tucked away from the main streets and surrounded by overgrown trees, only amplifies its chilling presence. Visitors describe a sensation of being watched, as though unseen eyes are tracking every movement, and the temperature near the building is said to drop inexplicably, even during summer months. Those brave enough to explore the asylum's interior recount experiences that defy easy explanation. Footsteps echo down long corridors, but when one turns to look, no one is there. Doors creak open slowly on their own, revealing rooms frozen in time. Rusted wheelchairs, broken beds, and decaying medical equipment stand as relics of a grim past. Some visitors claim to have seen shadowy figures standing in the corners of rooms or moving just beyond the reach of light. Others report hearing whispers, voices repeating fragmented phrases like "help me," "don't leave me," or the faint chanting of numbers and names, reminiscent of counting exercises or patient roll calls from another era. Cameras occasionally capture orbs of light or fleeting apparitions that vanish as quickly as they appear, further fueling speculation about the asylum's lingering spirits. Many of the hauntings at Alton Asylum are tied to its history of mistreatment and neglect. In the early 20th century, overcrowding was a persistent problem, and patients often lived in conditions that would now be considered inhumane. Treatments that were once standard electroshock therapy, isolation, and restraint left emotional scars that some believe never fully faded. Stories from former staff and patients speak of tragic incidents, from accidental deaths to cases of extreme suffering during solitary confinement. Paranormal enthusiasts suggest that the intensity of this emotional trauma created a residual energy within the building, imprinting itself on the walls, floors, and ceilings. They argue that what people experience today may be echoes of that suffering, a kind of psychic residue left behind by decades of anguish. Local legends also add a layer of eerie intrigue to the asylum. One story tells of a patient known only as Room 23, whose identity was lost to history. It is said that he wandered the halls for years before his death, speaking to no one, yet responding to invisible voices. Some claim that the spirit of Room 23 still roams the halls, a silent witness to the asylum's horrors. Another tale speaks of nurses and doctors who appear in old photographs taken on the grounds. Even though the building was supposedly empty at the time, these spectral images are interpreted by some as proof that the asylum's inhabitants, both living and dead, have not entirely departed. Exploration of Alton Asylum is not without risk. The building is in a state of significant decay, with collapsing floors, loose beams, and hazardous debris. Despite this, ghost hunters and curiosity seekers continue to venture inside, drawn by the promise of paranormal encounters. Equipment is often used to capture unusual phenomena, meters to detect electromagnetic anomalies, infrared cameras to spot heat signatures, and audio recorders to pick up faint voices that escape the human ear. Many report strange results: sudden drops in temperature, unexplained sounds, and fleeting shapes appearing in recordings. While skeptics argue these experiences can be explained by the building's age, acoustics, and the power of suggestion, those who have spent time inside insist that something far more unsettling lingers within. The surrounding community is well aware of the asylum's reputation. For decades, the site has been a source of local lore, stories passed down from generation to generation. Some residents avoid it altogether, convinced that the spirits within are malevolent or restless. Others see it as a reminder of the importance of compassion and reform in mental health care, a symbol of both human suffering and resilience. Periodically, organized tours and paranormal investigations are permitted, allowing curious visitors to witness the haunting atmosphere firsthand. These events often reinforce the asylum's reputation as participants share stories of unexplained touches, distant cries, or the unnerving feeling of being followed. Even in its abandoned state, Alton Asylum has a strange pull, a gravitational force that draws people in and keeps them talking about what they have seen or heard. Its history, marred by tragedy and neglect, combined with the persistent reports of paranormal activity, ensures that it remains more than just a forgotten building. The asylum embodies a liminal space where the line between the living and the dead feels uncertain. Its halls are silent, yet they echo with the memories of the past, offering both a chilling reminder of human suffering and a fascination with what lies beyond the ordinary. Kankakee Asylum, now known as the Shapiro Developmental Center, is a site steeped in history and shadowed by tragedy. Established in the early 20th century in Kankakee, Illinois, the asylum was originally designed to care for individuals with developmental disabilities and mental illnesses. Its sprawling brick structures and extensive grounds were meant to provide a controlled environment for treatment and rehabilitation. However, over the decades, the asylum became a place marked by overcrowding, underfunding, and neglect. Patients were often confined in stark conditions, and the institution's dark history has left an indelible mark on both the site and the surrounding community. Today, even though the facility functions in a more modern capacity, many claim that the spirits of those who suffered there still linger, haunting the grounds in ways that are impossible to ignore. Walking along the perimeters of the old Kankakee Asylum, one cannot help but feel the weight of its past. The red brick buildings, now weathered and aged, rise like silent sentinels over the expansive grounds. Windows are mostly intact, but occasionally reveal empty rooms where shadows seem to move independently of the light. Locals and curious visitors alike have reported an unsettling atmosphere around the property, describing sudden drops in temperature and a feeling of unease that grows stronger near the older wings. On quiet nights, some claim to hear faint cries or whispers carried across the wind, sounds that seem to echo from another era, perhaps from the voices of patients who spent their lives behind these walls. Inside the old wings, stories abound of unexplained phenomena. Visitors and paranormal investigators often speak of hearing footsteps echoing down corridors that are otherwise empty, doors opening or closing without cause, and the occasional glimpse of figures out of the corner of the eye. Some have reported seeing fleeting shadows dart across rooms, moving too quickly to be human. Others speak of a sensation of being watched, a presence that follows them from room to room. One recurring account involves hearing whispers, repeating names or phrases, sometimes a simple "help me," other times the cadence of a roll call, a reminder of the patient's daily routines during the asylum's operational years. These experiences have been documented in photographs, audio recordings, and video footage, with many claiming to have captured unexplainable anomalies, blurred forms, orbs of light, and disembodied voices that do not appear to have any earthly origin. The dark history of Kankakee Asylum is believed to contribute to these paranormal events. Overcrowding was a persistent issue for much of its history, with patients housed in dormitories far beyond safe capacity. Staff shortages, outdated treatment methods, and inadequate funding often left patients in conditions that would now be considered inhumane. Electroconvulsive therapy, prolonged restraints, and isolation were among the practices used in the name of treatment. Many patients lived and died with little attention, their struggles unnoticed and unrecorded. Paranormal experts suggest that this intense suffering created a residual energy within the building, imprinting itself on the physical spaces and manifesting as haunting phenomena for modern visitors. One particularly chilling tale concerns the so-called East Wing, a section of the asylum where patients with severe conditions were confined. Staff accounts from the mid-20th century describe hearing screams and seeing shadows in that wing, even when it was supposed to be empty. Today, visitors to the site claim that the East Wing is particularly active, with sudden chills, unexplainable noises, and the sensation of unseen eyes tracking their movements. Some insist they have witnessed apparitions of patients in old hospital gowns wandering the hallways, vanishing when approached. Others speak of objects moving inexplicably, chairs shifting, doors swinging open, or medical instruments appearing in places they were not before. Beyond the buildings themselves, the grounds of Kankakee Asylum are also said to be haunted. Patients and staff from decades past are rumored to linger among the trees and paths, particularly at dusk. Locals have reported hearing the distant laughter of children, the sound of a wheelchair rolling across the pavement, or the faint ringing of a bell that no longer exists. Some claim that during quiet nights, the wind carries fragments of songs and prayers, echoing the attempts of those who once sought comfort within the asylum's walls. Even modern staff at the Shapiro Developmental Center occasionally report fleeting glimpses of figures in the distance, shadows that vanish when investigated. Paranormal enthusiasts who explore the site often use specialized equipment to document these phenomena. EMF meters, thermal cameras, and audio recorders are commonly employed to capture evidence of the unexplained. Investigators have noted sudden spikes in electromagnetic activity, cold spots in specific areas, and audio anomalies that suggest communication from unseen entities. Whether these occurrences are the result of lingering spirits or environmental factors remains a topic of debate. Skeptics argue that old buildings naturally produce strange noises and drafts, and that the mind can fill in gaps with expectation. Still, those who have spent time inside the asylum insist that the experiences are far more personal, chilling, and undeniably real. The stories and legends surrounding Kankakee Asylum have become a part of the local culture. For decades, residents have shared accounts of strange happenings and paranormal encounters, passing them down through generations. The asylum serves as both a reminder of the importance of compassionate care and mental health treatment and a symbol of the lingering shadows of the past. Tours and investigations are occasionally permitted, providing visitors with a first-hand experience of the eerie atmosphere. Many report a sense of awe and fear, recognizing that the asylum's haunted reputation is not merely the product of imagination, but a reflection of real events and real suffering that left a permanent mark on the site. Even in its current incarnation as the Shapiro Developmental Center, the legacy of Kankakee Asylum endures. The modern facility operates with a commitment to treatment and care. Yet the old buildings remain as silent witnesses to decades of hardship for those who encounter them. The asylum's shadows and whispers serve as a powerful reminder that some places carry the weight of their history in a way that transcends time. Whether approached as a paranormal hotspot or a historical landmark, Kankakee Asylum continues to fascinate and unsettle, standing as a testament to the lives that once passed through its halls and the mysteries that remain. Elgin State Hospital, located in Elgin, Illinois, is a facility with a long and complex history. Established in the late 19th century, it was originally designed to care for those suffering from mental illnesses, offering what was then considered modern treatment. The sprawling complex, with its red brick buildings and expansive grounds, was intended to provide a controlled environment where patients could receive care, rehabilitation, and respite. Yet, as decades passed, the institution became a symbol of overcrowding, underfunding, and, at times, neglect. Reports of mistreatment and inhumane conditions left a permanent mark on the site. And today, even as it operates under the name Elgin Mental Health Center, the echoes of the past seem to linger. Visitors and paranormal enthusiasts alike report strange occurrences, suggesting that the spirits of former patients may never have truly left. Walking through the grounds of Elgin State Hospital, one can immediately sense a presence that is difficult to describe. The sprawling campus, though partially modernized, still retains the architecture of its original construction. Long, narrow hallways stretch into darkness, and the older wings, with their peeling paint and worn floors, convey a sense of time standing still. Local residents often recount hearing noises that cannot be explained: soft cries, sudden thuds, or the unmistakable sound of doors opening and closing when no one is nearby. Some say the air itself feels heavy, as if charged with the lingering emotions of those who once lived and died within the institution's walls. Inside the old wings, the paranormal activity is said to intensify. Visitors speak of hearing footsteps echoing down empty corridors, or faint voices murmuring patient names. Some report glimpses of shadowy figures that vanish when approached, and others describe objects moving inexplicably, sliding across floors, windows rattling, or medical instruments appearing in unusual places. Cameras have occasionally captured anomalies, blurred figures, strange lights, and orbs that float through the hallways as if guided by an unseen hand. Audio recorders have picked up faint, fragmented whispers that sound like staff calling for patients, or patients responding to unseen commands, a chilling reminder of the hospital's history. The dark legacy of Elgin State Hospital is inseparable from the reports of paranormal activity. In its early years, the hospital was chronically overcrowded. Patients were often housed in large dormitory-style rooms, sometimes with dozens of individuals in a single space. Staffing shortages and inadequate funding made proper care difficult, and treatment methods were often harsh by today's standards. Electroconvulsive therapy, prolonged restraints, and seclusion were commonly employed, and while some patients may have benefited, many endured suffering that left deep emotional and psychological scars. Over the decades, numerous tragic incidents occurred, including accidental deaths, self-harm, and the neglect of patients with severe conditions. Paranormal investigators suggest that such intense human suffering can leave a residual energy imprint, manifesting as ghostly apparitions, unexplained noises, and sensations of being watched. One of the most frequently cited locations for paranormal activity is the hospital's East Wing, where many of the most vulnerable patients were housed. Staff accounts from the mid-20th century describe hearing screams and seeing shadows, even when areas were supposed to be empty. Today, visitors to this wing report sudden chills, disembodied footsteps, and the feeling of a presence close behind. Shadowy figures in hospital gowns are said to appear and vanish in the corners of rooms, while distant cries echo through hallways with no discernible source. Some have even reported a strange, almost palpable pressure on their chest, as if an unseen entity were leaning close, observing them. The hospital grounds are also believed to host lingering spirits. Patients and staff from decades past are rumored to walk the outdoor paths, particularly near the older buildings. On quiet nights, people have reported hearing laughter that quickly turns to sobbing, the squeak of a wheelchair rolling across asphalt, or the faint tolling of a bell long since removed. Paranormal enthusiasts often return with stories of cold spots and sudden gusts of wind, seemingly focused around specific areas where historical records indicate patient incidents or tragic deaths occurred. Whether these experiences are products of the mind or proof of the supernatural remains debated, but the consistency of reports over time is striking. Exploration of Elgin State Hospital carries risks beyond the supernatural. The older buildings are in a state of disrepair, with rotting floors, exposed wiring, and crumbling walls. Despite this, curious visitors and paranormal investigators continue to venture inside, drawn by the hospital's reputation and the promise of encounters with the unknown. Equipment such as EMF meters, infrared cameras, and audio recorders are commonly used to document activity. Investigators report sudden electromagnetic spikes, unexplained thermal anomalies, and audio recordings capturing voices that do not correspond to anyone present. Even skeptics admit that the cumulative effect of the building's history, combined with its isolation and architecture, creates an atmosphere unlike any other. The stories and legends surrounding Elgin State Hospital have become ingrained in local lore. Generations of residents have shared accounts of strange sounds, ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable occurrences. For many, the hospital is more than a historical site. It is a reminder of the evolution of mental health care and the importance of compassion in treatment. Tours and organized paranormal investigations occasionally provide visitors with first-hand exposure to the facility's eerie ambience. Many participants describe a sense of tension, a feeling that the hospital itself is aware of their presence, and that the echoes of past patients continue to linger in its halls. Even as Elgin State Hospital operates today as the Elgin Mental Health Center, providing modern care and services, the shadow of its past remains. The old buildings, hallways, and grounds hold memories of decades of human suffering and institutional struggle. For those who encounter the hospital, whether as visitors, staff, or paranormal investigators, the experience is both fascinating and unsettling. The whispers in the corridors, the fleeting shadows, and the sudden chills all serve as a reminder that some places are shaped not just by their walls and roofs, but by the emotions and experiences of those who walked within them. Elgin State Hospital is one such place, a site where history and mystery intersect, and where the spirits of the past seem determined to be remembered. Grant Hospital, once a sprawling medical complex in Chicago's Lincoln Park, has long been steeped in stories of terror and the unexplained. Though the hospital was ultimately demolished, its reputation as one of the city's most haunted locations has persisted, echoing in urban legends, first-hand accounts, and chilling memories of those who walked its hallways from its earliest days. Grant Hospital was more than a medical facility, was a place where life and death collided, where human suffering often left an indelible mark on the environment itself. Opened in the late 19th century, Grant Hospital served thousands of patients over decades, many of whom were gravely ill or suffering from mental health issues. Reports from former staff and visitors describe a building that seemed to absorb the pain of its occupants. Long corridors stretched seemingly endlessly, lined with patient rooms that radiated unease. Even during the day, many described an oppressive atmosphere, a sense that the building itself was alive with memories of the countless people who had suffered, healed, or passed away within its walls. The hospital's haunted reputation began with persistent accounts of unexplained sounds. Staff frequently reported hearing screaming, crying, or murmuring in hallways long after patients had been moved or discharged. These sounds were particularly intense at night, when the hospital was quieter, and the emptiness of the wards amplified every echo. Some nurses claimed to hear a woman screaming for help in a room that had been empty for years. Others spoke of phantom footsteps pacing the corridors, following them from room to room, disappearing as soon as they turned to look. In addition to auditory phenomena, many reported visual disturbances. Shadows moved in the corners of hallways where no one stood, and figures were glimpsed in patient rooms before vanishing into walls. Some visitors described seeing a man in a long coat standing silently at the end of a corridor, watching them, only to disappear when approached. In certain areas of the hospital, staff swore that beds would shift or rocking chairs would move on their own. Lights flickered, elevators operated without command, and doors would slam for no reason, all of which contributed to an overwhelming sense of unease. The hospital's morgue and operating theaters were often singled out as hotspots for paranormal activity. Stories circulated of apparitions lingering near cold steel tables, and some claimed to see faint outlines of patients who had passed away decades earlier. Equipment that should have been lifeless would emit strange sounds, such as the low hum of a machine starting up or the clatter of surgical tools. Visitors reported sudden drops in temperature and the feeling of being touched by unseen hands. Many described the sensation of eyes following them, of being watched by invisible residents of the hospital long after it had closed. One particularly chilling story involved a former nurse who stayed late to complete paperwork. As she walked down the central corridor, She felt a sudden presence behind her. She turned to see nothing, yet heard a low, guttural moan echoing through the hallway. Papers scattered off her desk, lights flickered violently, and a cold wind swept through the room, though the windows were closed. She left immediately, but swore that the sounds of whispering continued to follow her down the stairs, fading only when she stepped outside into the night. Patients themselves contributed to the hospital's eerie aura. Many of the hospital's long-term residents were vulnerable and often suffered in silence, and some reported encounters with figures that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Ghostly nurses or doctors were seen tending to invisible patients, their movements precise and clinical, as though continuing their duties in the afterlife. Some said the hallways were haunted not by malicious spirits, but by the echoes of routine, the repetition of countless days spent in treatment, recovery, and despair. Even after the hospital's demolition, tales of hauntings persist. Locals and paranormal enthusiasts speak of feeling inexplicable chills on the site, and some claim to hear faint screams or footsteps when passing nearby at night. Photographs taken in the surrounding area occasionally reveal unexplained orbs or shadowy figures. Many assert that the energy of the hospital never truly left, that the suffering and intense emotions accumulated over decades remain trapped in the memory of the land itself. Grant Hospital's story is a reminder of the fine line between the living and the dead, between memory and reality. Its haunted reputation is not just the result of dark imagination, but of a place where human suffering was concentrated, repeated, and unresolved. The voices that echoed in its hallways, the shadows glimpsed in corners, and the inexplicable phenomena reported for decades all speak to the lingering presence of those who lived and died within its walls. Copley Hospital in Aurora, Illinois, has stood for over a century, its brick facade and towering windows a silent witness to the passage of time. Opened in 1888, it was designed as a state-of-the-art medical facility for its era, intended to provide care and comfort to the sick and injured. But behind its historic charm lies a darker legacy, one that continues to attract curiosity seekers, urban explorers, and those drawn to the paranormal. Despite modern renovations and restorations, the hospital's older wings retain an unsettling energy, leaving many visitors convinced that the building itself remembers the suffering it once contained. Even in daylight, the hospital exudes a quiet unease. Long hallways stretch farther than they should, and the echoes of footsteps seem to linger unnaturally. Those familiar with the hospital's history note that it treated countless patients over decades, including those with infectious diseases, severe injuries, and mental health challenges, at a time when medical practices were rudimentary by today's standards. The high turnover of patients and the intensity of the suffering left an invisible imprint, one that some say continues to manifest in strange and inexplicable ways. Urban explorers, often seeking to document abandoned spaces, have been among the first to report odd experiences. In the older sections of the building, where renovations are minimal and peeling paint exposes the passage of time, visitors describe hearing whispering voices that cannot be traced to any source. Doors creak open by themselves, and footsteps echo through hallways with no one present. Some have felt sudden cold drafts in rooms where the heating has long been turned off, a phenomenon often accompanied by the sensation of being watched. Sightings are not uncommon. Shadows flit across hallways, vanishing when approached, and figures in period clothing are sometimes glimpsed in peripheral vision. One explorer recounted ascending a staircase to find a pale figure standing at the top, silently staring before disappearing into the darkness. Others have reported seeing the fleeting image of a nurse or doctor performing tasks as if the hospital were still fully operational, moving between rooms and hallways, unseen by anyone else. The hospital's operating rooms and former patient wards are particular hotspots for paranormal activity. Visitors often describe a sense of oppression upon entering these spaces, a heavy atmosphere that presses down on the chest and makes breathing feel laborious. Some have heard the rhythmic tapping of surgical instruments on metal trays, even when the rooms are empty, and the distant hum of machines long decommissioned. In the old wards, faint cries and murmurs of distress are sometimes reported. suggesting that the emotional energy of former patients remains deeply embedded in the walls. Even the hospital's basement, long used for storage and maintenance, carries its own reputation. Lights flicker inexplicably, and shadows move against the walls, though no one is there. Some visitors have described hearing the sound of water dripping, echoing like a steady heartbeat through the concrete corridors, accompanied by a feeling of being followed. Others report that objects appear to move on their own, chairs sliding across floors and doors opening without cause. Staff who worked in the hospital after renovations also experienced unexplained phenomena. Nurses and administrative workers have reported hearing disembodied footsteps, especially in the old wings at night. Some recount seeing figures in hospital gowns, wandering hallways, or catching glimpses of faces peering from behind closed doors. Equipment occasionally malfunctioned in ways that could not be explained, and lights would flicker or shut off without warning. For many, these experiences reinforce the belief that Copley Hospital retains the echoes of its past, that it is more than a building, it is a repository of memory, pain, and lingering presence. Visitors often speak of an overwhelming sensation upon entering the hospital, a mixture of sorrow, tension, and unease. Even those who do not witness apparitions may feel inexplicably unsettled, sensing that something unseen is aware of their presence. This intangible weight seems particularly pronounced in the hospital's older wings, where the original architecture remains intact and the history is most palpable. The experience is not merely psychological. Many who visit report physical reactions, cold chills, goosebumps, or a racing heartbeat triggered by encounters that cannot be rationally explained. Local legend has it that certain rooms are cursed with the memories of the patients who passed away there, their spirits unwilling or unable to move on. The hospital's long corridors, silent waiting rooms, and abandoned medical wings seem to preserve these energies, creating an environment where past and present coexist in uneasy proximity. Even renovations, while restoring the hospital's appearance, cannot erase the subtle impressions left by decades of human suffering, trauma, and death. Despite its haunted reputation, Copley Hospital remains a historical landmark, drawing visitors who are intrigued by both its architecture and its dark past. Those willing to explore the building often do so with a sense of caution, aware that the hospital's stories are more than mere folklore. Whether one encounters whispering voices, shadowy figures, sudden chills, or the feeling of being watched, the experiences at Copley Hospital point to a lingering presence, proof that some places, steeped in human emotion and history, cannot be fully tamed or forgotten. St. Luke's Hospital Complex in Chicago, Illinois, is a site where history and mystery intertwine. A sprawling medical campus steeped in both architectural grandeur and chilling tales. Founded in 1864, St. Luke's was established to provide care for the city's growing population, particularly those suffering from illness, during a time when medical knowledge was rapidly evolving but far from complete. Over the decades, the hospital expanded into a complex of Gothic Revival buildings, with soaring spires, arched windows, and ornate stonework that gave it a solemn, almost cathedral-like presence. Yet behind the impressive facades, St. Luke's developed a reputation that extended beyond its medical care, a reputation for hauntings, unexplained phenomena, and lingering spirits that many believe still occupy its halls. Visitors to the old hospital buildings often describe a sense of unease that sets in immediately upon approaching the complex. The Gothic architecture, while striking, casts long shadows across the grounds, particularly at dusk, giving the campus an eerie, foreboding atmosphere. Even during the daytime, the heavy stone walls and narrow corridors seem to carry the weight of decades of human suffering. Locals and past staff have reported hearing strange sounds coming from the old wing's, faint footsteps, echoing in empty hallways, distant whispers that carry through walls, and sudden creaks and groans that seem to come from nowhere. On rare occasions, the sound of a door slamming can be heard even when no one is near. These reports have persisted for decades, fueling the hospital's reputation as a place where the past refuses to rest. Inside the hospital, accounts of paranormal activity are equally unsettling. Visitors and paranormal investigators frequently report seeing shadowy figures out of the corner of their eyes, moving through hallways and disappearing when approached. Some describe hearing voices calling patient names, murmured conversations, or faint cries that seem to echo from rooms long since abandoned. The hospital's older wards, where patients were treated in the early 20th century, are particularly active, according to these accounts. Rooms that once held dozens of patients now sit empty, but those who enter often report cold spots, sudden chills, or the sensation of being watched. Equipment occasionally moves inexplicably, and furniture is sometimes found slightly displaced, as if disturbed by invisible hands. Cameras have captured unusual lights and fleeting shapes that defy easy explanation, while audio recorders have picked up faint, unidentifiable voices that do not correspond to any living presence in the building. Much of St. Luke's haunted reputation is tied to its long and sometimes tragic history. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the hospital faced overcrowding, limited resources, and the challenges of medical practices that would now seem harsh. Patients suffering from chronic illnesses, injuries, or mental health conditions were sometimes kept in wards for extended periods, often under difficult conditions. Treatments were experimental, and mistakes were not uncommon. There are numerous accounts of patients passing away alone, unnoticed until hours later, and staff who worked tirelessly under grueling conditions often reported a sense of the hospital being alive with sorrow. Paranormal researchers suggest that such intense emotions, combined with prolonged suffering and sudden deaths, can leave residual energy in a location, a psychic imprint that manifests as ghostly phenomena in later years. One particularly chilling story revolves around a wing known as the East Pavilion. Once home to long-term patients, staff and visitors alike report hearing footsteps pacing the hallways at night, even when no one is present. Some claim to have seen the faint outline of a nurse or orderly walk in the corridors, only to vanish as soon as they approach. Others report doors swinging open or closing on their own, lights flickering unexpectedly, and the faint smell of antiseptic mixed with an unidentifiable, old odor that seems to linger long after the rooms have been cleaned. Some say that the East Pavilion is haunted by both staff and patients, spirits who continue to carry out the routines and movements of their lives long after their deaths. The hospital grounds themselves are also believed to be haunted. At night, some report seeing shadowy figures moving between buildings, as though retracing steps from a bygone era. Others hear distant laughter, the wheeze of a wheelchair, or the faint ringing of a bell that no longer exists. Visitors describe the sensation of being followed, even in open spaces, and a deep sense of unease that intensifies as they explore the older sections of the campus. Despite modernization and continued use of parts of the complex for medical purposes, the legends of St. Luke's persist. Paranormal investigators frequently visit the site with EMF detectors, infrared cameras, and audio recording devices to capture evidence of the unexplained. Many report sudden spikes in electromagnetic activity, temperature fluctuations, and strange sounds on recordings. Some skeptics argue that old buildings naturally produce noises and drafts, and that shadows and reflections can create the illusion of movement. However, those who have spent time inside the hospital insist that the experiences are far more vivid and personal than any rational explanation can account for. The stories surrounding St. Luke's Hospital complex have become part of Chicago's lore, passed down through generations. The combination of its rich architectural history, long-standing medical significance, and tales of hauntings continues to draw curious visitors, historians, and paranormal enthusiasts. For some, the hospital is a reminder of how far medicine has come and the importance of empathy and care. For others, it is a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead feel thin, where shadows and whispers serve as reminders that the past is never truly gone. Even as modern healthcare continues within parts of the complex, the old buildings remain a testament to decades of human experience, suffering, care, and mystery. The Gothic arches and silent corridors carry the memory of countless lives, some filled with hope, others with despair. Visitors leave with a mix of fascination and unease, having glimpsed a place where history and the supernatural converge. St. Luke's Hospital complex stands, not just as a relic of Chicago's medical past, but as a place where the echoes of former patients and staff continue to resonate, haunting the halls and grounds in ways that defy explanation. The Mound City Civil War Naval Hospital in Mound City, Illinois, stands as one of the most historically significant, yet eerily haunted sites from America's bloodiest conflict, established during the Civil War. The hospital was built in 1861 to treat Union soldiers injured in battles along the Mississippi River and surrounding territories. What began as a converted warehouse along the river quickly transformed into one of the largest naval hospitals in the country. Thousands of wounded soldiers, sailors, and prisoners of war passed through its doors, many recovering, many more taking their final breaths within its walls. Today, the site where the hospital once stood is shrouded in mystery. Locals and visitors alike claim that the spirits of those long-departed soldiers still linger, their suffering and sacrifice echoing through time. During the Civil War, Mound City Naval Hospital was a place of both hope and despair. It was equipped to handle hundreds of patients at a time, though the number often swelled far beyond capacity. The moans of the injured filled the air, and the smell of antiseptic mixed with the metallic scent of blood. Doctors worked tirelessly under primitive conditions, using rudimentary tools and techniques. Amputations were common, anesthesia was limited, and infection was often deadly. Records suggest that more than 2,000 soldiers died within the hospital's walls. Many were buried nearby, their graves marked only by wooden crosses that have long since rotted away. Even after the hospital closed, people who visited the grounds reported a strange heaviness in the air. The silence of the place feels alive, interrupted by sounds that have no logical source. Visitors often describe hearing faint cries, the distant ring of surgical instruments, or the soft tread of boots on wooden floors that no longer exist. Some claim to hear the faint cadence of a military march at night, as if ghostly soldiers continue to patrol the grounds. Over the years, multiple reports have surfaced of apparitions appearing on the site where the hospital once stood. Witnesses have described seeing figures dressed in Union uniforms, their outlines shimmering in the moonlight before vanishing without a trace. Some appeared to be pacing slowly, as though searching for something or someone they lost. Others seemed to move with purpose, like doctors or nurses, still tending to patients long after death. The most frequently reported apparition is that of a soldier lying on a stretcher, his face pale and eyes wide open, appearing for just a moment before fading into thin air. Visitors who encounter this vision often describe feeling a sudden chill, as though the temperature has dropped drastically around them. Local residents tell stories of hearing unexplained noises in the night, muffled voices, cries for help, or the rhythmic clinking of surgical tools. Sometimes, there are sounds of hurried footsteps and doors slamming, even though the original hospital buildings were demolished decades ago. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site report cold spots, electromagnetic fluctuations, and strange energy readings. Many believe that the spirits of the soldiers who suffered and died at Mound City have never fully found peace, their trauma anchored to the very soil. One particularly unsettling story involves a nurse known in local legend as Clara. According to historical accounts, many women volunteered at Mound City to care for the wounded. Clara was said to be one of the most dedicated nurses, tirelessly tending to patients day and night. Some say she died of illness during the war. Others claim she perished in an accidental fire. Regardless of her true fate, numerous witnesses over the years have claimed to see the ghostly figure of a woman in a long, blood-stained dress wandering the grounds. Her presence is often accompanied by the faint scent of lavender, a fragrance reportedly worn by nurses during that era. Those who have seen her say she moves slowly, sometimes bending as if to comfort an invisible patient before disappearing into the shadows. The nearby cemetery, where many of the hospital's dead were buried, is also said to be haunted. Visitors to the site have reported seeing glowing orbs of light drifting among the graves, believed to be the souls of soldiers who never left. Some have heard faint whispers or the rustle of uniforms brushing against tall grass, even when the wind is still. Those who visit after dark describe feeling watched, as if unseen eyes are following their every move. For historians, the hauntings of Mound City Naval Hospital represent more than ghost stories. They are reminders of the immense human suffering endured during the Civil War. The hospital treated soldiers from both sides of the conflict, and in death, those divisions seem to have dissolved. Paranormal investigators often note that the spirits do not appear to be malicious, but rather restless. They seem bound to the place where they experienced their greatest pain, replaying fragments of their final moments in an endless loop. Some believe that these hauntings are not active spirits, but residual energy, an imprint of history that continues to echo through time. Others insist the souls themselves are still present, unable or unwilling to move on. Even today, the site where the hospital once stood attracts historians, ghost hunters, and curious travelers. Those who visit describe an atmosphere unlike any other. Quiet reverence mixed with an unmistakable tension. The land feels alive, humming with memories. At times, the air grows cold without warning, and faint murmurs drift across the open fields. Occasionally, someone catches a glimpse of movement, the flicker of a uniform disappearing around a corner that no longer exists. The Mound City Civil War Naval Hospital remains a powerful symbol of sacrifice and suffering. It stands as a reminder of the thousands of lives touched by war, both those who fought and those who cared for the wounded. The haunting stories that surround it are not just tales of fear, they are echoes of humanity, fragments of courage and pain that refuse to be forgotten. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, it's difficult to deny the emotional energy that clings to the site. For some, it is sacred ground. For others, it is a place where the past still breathes. And for those who stand there in the quiet of night, listening to the distant echo of boots on the earth, there is no question that someone's still remains. Bartonville Insane Asylum, once known as the Illinois Asylum for the Incurable Insane, stood on a quiet stretch of land near Peoria, Illinois. Built in the late 19th century, the facility was intended to house patients deemed beyond recovery, those whose minds had slipped too far from the grasp of sanity. Yet, as the years went on, the asylum became infamous, not just for its tragic history of overcrowding and neglect, but for the strange and unsettling phenomena that lingered long after its doors closed. Even now, though the buildings have been demolished, the stories of Bartonville's restless dead continue to echo through Illinois folklore. The asylum's imposing main building, constructed of stone and brick, loomed like a fortress over the rolling hills. Inside, long hallways stretched endlessly, lined with iron doors that led to patient wards, treatment rooms, and isolation cells. The walls once echoed with the cries of those lost to madness, and with the heavy footsteps of orderlies making their rounds at night. Patients often wandered aimlessly, whispering to unseen figures or staring blankly into the distance. There were wards for the violent, wards for the hopelessly melancholic, and wards for those who no longer remembered their own names. Conditions at Bartonville fluctuated over the years. In its early decades, overcrowding and poor sanitation made life unbearable. Some patients slept on straw mats, others in cramped dormitories that reeked of disinfectant and despair. The staff was overworked and undertrained, and rumors circulated about cruel treatments, cold water therapies, forced restraint, and long periods of isolation. Though later administrators attempted reform, the asylum's reputation as a place of suffering never truly faded. But what truly set Bartonville apart was not just a tragedy of its past, but the ghostly legends that grew around it. One of the most enduring tales centered on a cemetery caretaker known only as Old Book. He was a patient himself, yet also a gentle man, trusted to tend to the asylum's burial grounds, where thousands of unnamed souls were laid to rest. Old Book took great pride in his work, often seen weeping openly during the funerals of fellow patients. When Old Book passed away, it's said that his funeral was attended by staff and patients alike. As his coffin was lowered into the earth, witnesses claimed to see a figure standing in the distant stall, stooped and unmistakably familiar. The figure wept loudly, clutching its face in its hands, before vanishing before the eyes of the mourners. Those who were there swore that the apparition was Old Book himself, mourning his own burial. After that day, The cemetery was never the same. Groundskeepers and night watchmen reported hearing sobbing among the gravestones long after midnight. Some saw a shadowy figure moving between the markers, carrying a shovel, as though still tending to the dead. Others heard whispered prayers or the sound of dirt being turned, even when the earth lay untouched. Inside the asylum, the haunting took on a different character. Former nurses and visitors spoke of doors slamming on their own, lights flickering in empty corridors, and whispers echoing through the walls. Some claimed to hear the sounds of patients crying out, though the wards had been empty for decades. Others described the unmistakable sound of footsteps pacing the upper floors, though no one could be found when they investigated. The most chilling encounters often occurred in the oldest sections of the complex places long abandoned before demolition. The basement tunnels, used to transport supplies and sometimes patients, were said to be particularly active. Explorers who dared enter after the asylum closed reported feeling sudden drops in temperature, hearing faint breathing in the dark, or seeing fleeting figures in the corner of their vision. One visitor described hearing a faint voice whisper her name as she stood near the morgue. When she turned, there was nothing there, just the rusted remains of gurneys and the lingering smell of mildew. Others reported hearing faint strains of music, as though a piano were being played somewhere in the distance. Yet the asylum had no functioning instruments left. Local paranormal investigators frequently visited Bartonville in its later years, bringing cameras, recorders, and electromagnetic sensors. Many claimed to capture unexplained sounds, soft sobs, footsteps, or low moans. In one recording, a man's voice could be faintly heard, repeating the words, "Help me," over and over. Skeptics dismissed the findings as interference or imagination, but those who experienced it firsthand insisted there was something genuinely restless about the place. Even after demolition, strange occurrences have persisted on the land where Bartonville once stood. Locals driving past late at night report seeing a flickering light moving through the fields, like the glow of a lantern swaying in the dark. Some say it's old Book making his rounds. Others believe it's the spirits of former patients, still wandering the grounds they once called home. There are even claims that disembodied voices can still be heard near the site's old cemetery site, echoing sobs carried on the wind. The legacy of Bartonville Insane Asylum endures as both a cautionary tale and a lingering mystery. It stands as a reminder of an era when mental illness was poorly understood and compassion was often replaced with control. Yet amid the pain and neglect, there were glimmers of humanity. Patients, like old Book, whose gentle spirit refused to fade even in death. Today, those who visit the area describe an eerie stillness that settles over the land. Some believe the spirits of Bartonville remain because they were never truly seen in life, forgotten souls who linger, waiting to be remembered. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, there is no denying the emotional weight of places like Bartonville. They are repositories of human suffering, memory, and emotion energies that do not easily fade with time. Perhaps the whispers heard on the wind are not ghosts at all, but echoes of pain and compassion intertwined, resonating from the walls that once confined so many. Chicago State Hospital, once one of Illinois' most prominent psychiatric facilities, stood as a symbol of both hope and despair. Built in the late 1800s on Chicago's South Side, it was meant to be a place of healing, a refuge for those suffering from mental illness during an era when the mind's mysteries were scarcely understood. But as decades passed, the hospital became known not for its cures, but for the darkness that seemed to take root in its long, echoing corridors. Today, though its buildings stand abandoned, whispers of its haunted past continue to ripple through Chicago's urban legends. The hospital's sprawling campus once stretched across acres of land, with red brick buildings rising from the earth like sentinels of another age. The main structure, built in the Gothic Revival style, was adorned with arched windows and looming towers. To some, it looked like a grand institution of care. To others, it resembled a prison. Its wide hallways were lined with polished floors, its ceilings high enough for voices to echo endlessly. Patients arrived from all over the state, men and women deemed too troubled or unstable to live in society. Many never left. At its height, Chicago State Hospital housed thousands of patients. It was overcrowded, understaffed, and constantly struggling to maintain order. Reports from the early 20th century described a chaotic environment, patients restrained for days, electric shock treatments administered without anesthesia, and experimental therapies that often did more harm than good. The facility was intended to offer care, but for many, it became a place of confinement and forgotten lives. Yet within its walls, there were also moments of humanity. Nurses worked tirelessly to ease suffering, and some doctors truly believed in the possibility of recovery. But the balance between hope and horror was fragile, and over time, the scales tipped toward despair. Death was common within those walls, sometimes from illness, sometimes from neglect, and sometimes by the patient's own hand. The hospital grounds became home to a small cemetery, where unclaimed bodies were laid to rest beneath simple markers, each bearing only a number. It is said that this cemetery is where the hauntings began. Visitors have reported seeing faint lights flickering among the graves, like lanterns moving through the mist. Some hear whispers calling their names, while others claim to see pale figures standing at the edge of the field, watching silently. One former security guard recounted seeing a shadow cross between the trees late one night, tall, slow, and moving against the direction of the wind. When he called out, the shadow stopped, turned, and disappeared. Inside the old buildings, the atmosphere is even heavier. Those who have dared to explore describe a suffocating silence, broken only by the occasional groan of settling wood or the drip of water from leaking pipes. The air is thick with the smell of mildew and decay, and yet, beneath it all, there lingers a faint scent of antiseptic, echo of the hospital's former life. The old wards are said to be especially active. In some rooms, doors slam shut without warning. In others, faint crying can be heard coming from empty beds. One urban explorer described walking through a corridor when the temperature suddenly dropped, her breath visible in the air despite the summer heat. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, following her from behind. When she turned around, the hallway was empty. The hospital's underground tunnels are another source of dread, built to connect various buildings and to transport supplies during Chicago's harsh winters. They later served a darker purpose. During times of overcrowding, patients were reportedly moved through these tunnels to isolation rooms below the main structure. Some say the tunnels also doubled as makeshift morgues when the death toll rose. Today, those who enter them report hearing whispers echoing through the darkness, as if the walls themselves remember the cries of those who once passed through. There are countless stories of ghostly encounters tied to specific parts of the hospital. One of the most famous involves the old surgical ward, where operations were performed under dim lighting and with primitive equipment. Staff members who worked there before the hospital's closure claimed that even during the day, the room felt wrong. Cold spots appeared in random places, and instruments sometimes moved on their own. After the hospital shut down, explorers who entered the ward reported seeing what looked like a figure standing behind the cracked glass observation window, wearing a long coat, though no one else was in the building. Another recurring apparition is said to be that of a nurse dressed in a white uniform, her hair neatly tied, gliding silently down the halls with a clipboard in hand. Witnesses describe her face as calm but expressionless, her eyes vacant as she moves from room to room. Some believe she is the spirit of a nurse who refused to leave her patients, even in death. Others think she may be a manifestation of the hospital's collective sorrow, a symbol of all those who tried to bring compassion into a place that had lost its humanity. Perhaps the most chilling reports come from the administrative building, where the offices once stood. Several night guards have described hearing typewriters clacking in the empty records room, as though unseen hands were documenting the lives of patients long forgotten. Others claim that when they walk through the building at night, they hear faint conversations, muffled voices debating, pleading, or weeping echoing through the air vents. Local residents living near the former hospital grounds still speak of strange phenomena. Lights appear in windows of the long-abandoned structures, flickering on and off without power. Some even claim to have seen figures standing behind the curtains, watching the world beyond the walls they can never leave. Though much of the Chicago State Hospital has been closed off or demolished, its legacy endures. Paranormal investigators frequently list it among Illinois' most haunted sites, citing its long history of suffering and loss. Whether the spirits that linger are the tormented souls of former patients or simply the echoes of human tragedy, few can deny the uneasy energy that surrounds the place. Perhaps what remains at Chicago State Hospital is not merely haunting in the supernatural sense, but haunting in memory, a reflection of how society once treated those it did not understand. The voices heard in its corridors might not belong to ghosts at all, but to the echo of neglect, compassion, and despair woven into the very fabric of its walls. The Jacksonville Developmental Center in Jacksonville, Illinois, has a history stretching back over a century and a half, a history that begins with promise and ends in mystery. Opened in 1851 as the Illinois State Asylum and Hospital for the Insane, it was one of the first institutions of its kind in the state, designed to offer treatment and refuge for those suffering from mental illness. But what began as a vision of progress soon descended into tragedy, neglect, and rumor. By the time the facility closed its doors, the place had earned a chilling reputation as one of Illinois' most haunted sites. In its earliest days, the asylum stood as a symbol of modern medicine. The building itself was grand, built of limestone and brick, with tall windows that allowed sunlight to pour into patient wards. It was located on a vast stretch of land, surrounded by fields and trees, meant to provide peace and quiet for its residents. Dr. Andrew McFarland, the hospital's first superintendent, believed strongly in the idea of moral treatment, that kindness, routine, and a calm environment could help restore sanity. But as the decades passed, ideals gave way to harsh realities. By the late 1800s, overcrowding became a severe issue. What was built to house a few hundred patients soon held thousands. With too many patients and too few staff, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Sanitation was poor, food was scarce, and the once bright corridors grew dark with neglect. Patients who could not be controlled were locked in isolation cells. Others were subjected to experimental treatments, ice baths, insulin shock therapy, and early forms of electroshock. The cries of the suffering echoed through the wards, and over time, the hospital's reputation shifted from one of healing to one of horror. It was said that many who entered never came out. Those who died within its walls were often buried in unmarked graves on the hospital grounds. Their families rarely knew their final resting place. By the early 20th century, the asylum's name had changed, but its reputation had not. It became the Jacksonville State Hospital, then later the Jacksonville Developmental Center, serving residents with developmental disabilities rather than psychiatric illnesses. Yet the echoes of the past never fully faded. Staff members spoke of strange occurrences, doors opening on their own, disembodied voices, and sudden temperature drops in empty rooms. One of the most frequently told stories involves the abandoned wings of the old asylum. Even after much of the original building was sealed off, maintenance workers reported hearing footsteps in the locked hallways at night. Some described hearing what sounded like faint crying, as if someone were calling for help from behind the walls. Others said that when they entered a room to investigate, the air would turn icy cold and a heavy silence would settle over everything. Former nurses told of lights flickering on in areas without power, and of shadowy figures glimpsed at the ends of long corridors. One nurse claimed she saw a woman in a tattered hospital gown standing in a doorway, her head tilted to one side. When the nurse approached, the woman vanished into thin air. Another staff member reported hearing a man's voice whispered his name as he locked up one night, though he was completely alone. Visitors who toured the property after its closure described feeling a deep sense of sorrow hanging over the grounds. Some said it felt as if the very walls were soaked in emotion, fear, pain, and confusion from generations of lost souls. Paranormal investigators who entered the facility brought cameras and recorders, hoping to capture evidence of the hauntings. Many claimed success. Recordings from these investigations are said to contain eerie sounds, faint whispers, unexplained knocks, and even what seems to be crying. In one chilling account, A team recorded what sounded like a woman softly singing an old hymn, though no one was present on the floor at the time. Another investigator described seeing movement in his peripheral vision, only to find nothing when he turned his flashlight toward it. Some even reported being touched by unseen hands or feeling a sudden pressure on their shoulders. The most infamous area of the Jacksonville Developmental Center is said to be the basement, where patients were once taken for treatments. The air there is heavy, damp, and filled with the smell of rust and decay. Visitors often describe feeling an overwhelming sense of dread upon entering. Some report hearing faint moans echoing from the dark, while others claim to have seen the flicker of lantern light moving through the shadows. There are stories, too, of the hospital cemetery, where hundreds of former patients are buried under simple markers bearing only numbers. Locals say that on still nights, strange lights move among the graves. A few have heard what sounds like low voices, murmuring prayers, or the faint rhythm of footsteps pacing between the stones. Some believe these restless spirits remain because they were forgotten in life and in death. They seek acknowledgement, even after its official closure. The Jacksonville Developmental Center continued to draw curiosity seekers and ghost hunters. Those who trespassed on the grounds at night often reported the same phenomena: sudden chills, flickering lights, and the sensation of being watched. Some claimed to hear the faint jingle of keys, as if a long-gone orderly were still making his rounds. Others described hearing the metallic scrape of gurneys moving along the floors, even though the halls had been empty for years. The history of the Jacksonville Developmental Center is steeped in both human tragedy and enduring mystery. It stands as a stark reminder of an era when mental illness and disability were misunderstood and mistreated. Thousands of people passed through its doors, some receiving genuine care, others enduring unimaginable hardship. And while the institution's purpose may have changed over time, the sorrow that lingered within its walls never seemed to leave. Those who have visited the site often describe a strange paradox. On the surface, the grounds appear calm, sunlight falling on the old brick buildings, grass swaying gently in the wind. But beneath that calm lies a tension, as if the land itself remembers what happened there. A quiet grief that refuses to fade. Perhaps that is why so many believe the spirits of Jacksonville Developmental Center remain. They are not malicious, but mournful echoes of lives forgotten by history. Some say they are the patients who suffered in silence. Others the staff who devoted their lives to helping them. All are bound together in the same place, tethered to the memories of what was once called a hospital, but became something far darker. As we conclude our journey through the haunted hospitals of Illinois, we are reminded that the past never truly fades away. The echoes of those who suffered and passed within these walls continue to resonate, leaving behind stories that chill the soul. If you dare to explore these sites, remember to tread carefully, for some spirits are not at rest. Thank you for joining us on this haunting adventure. Until next time, keep your lights on and your senses sharp. The shadows are always watching.